Hello and welcome to this Business Analyst full course by Mindmajix. In today's digital economy, businesses are generating massive amounts of data and constantly evolving to meet customer expectations. But how do organizations transform this complexity into clear, actionable strategies? That's where the role of business analysts becomes critical. Business analysts act as a bridge between stakeholders and technology teams, ensuring business requirements are clearly understood, translated into technical solutions, and delivered effectively. In this full course, we will cover everything you need to know from the fundamentals of business analysis, requirement gathering techniques, process modeling, Agile and Scrum methodologies, documentation practices to advanced tools. According to NASCOM and IIBA India reports, demand for business analysts in India growing rapidly, with roles spanning IT services, consulting, and product-based companies. Salary ranges between 6 to 15 lakh rupees per annum in India, and with strong domain expertise and advanced skills, professionals can earn even more. Certifications like ECBA, CCBA, and CBAP are highly valued by employers and can significantly boost your career prospects. And if you want to learn paid business analyst course with certification, then check out our course where we will cover latest industry curriculum, hands-on projects, labs, mock interviews, and more. Check the link in the description below. Before moving ahead, I want you guys to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss any tutorials and courses from us. Now, let's get started with our business analyst course.
So this resource was built by business analysis practitioners from around the world to help us better define both the profession and the practice of BA work. It's a standard of the key concepts that are critical to business analysis success. This tool is your key reference or key resource, you can say, Sneha, to help you prepare a solid foundation, as well as it will become a handy test reference for any of your future analysis work. In the BABOK guide, there are models to help you think holistically about any initiative where BA work is required. One more thing, the IABA Business Analysis Core Concept Model is a key focus area for helping you understand change initiatives and holistically analyze how the change is delivering value. And definition of the space where BA work occurs, these are called the knowledge area. Then, with each of these knowledge area, the key tasks and techniques that are commonly used are being highlighted. And this proficiency is common competencies of its practitioners that are not necessarily only applicable in the BA space, but are necessary to be successful analyst in general. These are covered in the underlying competencies section. Then guide then gives you some perspective on BA work and how it can actually vary from IT to agile practices with guidance and how to tailor your analysis activities. And finally, there is a very comprehensive vocabulary being used in that all BA professionals should be very familiar with and will be required of you to fully understand that. And this is aimed at people who work with BA to better understand the required set of skills and their scope of work with appealing memorization techniques presented. The team from uh, an imaginary software project company and an abundance of real life scenario. So you'll be able to get a complete deep dive into the process of requirements management. Business analysis manage requirements. Throughout the course we will cover the requirements lifecycle management knowledge area from the BABOK guide, Sneha, because that is our bible. Firstly, you can use it as a learning buddy either for the course process or to upgrade your BA skills. Secondly, you will learn engaging memorization techniques to help you study the material. Plus, you will be able to use them further in your life and career, whether you are preparing for any IB exam at the moment or just planning to take that wrong. This course is here to help you better understand the requirements lifecycle management knowledge area specifically. Most importantly, I will explain the strategy and the techniques that actually helped me gain my certifications and pick up the core of BA professional goals, task, and orientation. The structure of the course follows the BABOK guide, naming all of the tasks that are contained in this. I will primarily explain the purpose of the knowledge area, Sneha, and I will highlight its importance in the BA process as a whole. We will also emphasize the essential fact that a BA is an iterative process. So you are aware that each of the tasks can be performed as soon as the needed inputs are available. To give you a heads up, Sneha, it's essential for you to have a concrete study plan and multiple resources available to deep dive into studying. And therefore, you will comprehend much inputs and outputs are related to this knowledge area overall. And in each of the modules, you are going to learn specifics for this inputs and outputs and the exact one needed to start the correlating task. And as the core concept model, which describes the BABOK guide knowledge areas, I will explain its usage and application in the requirements lifecycle management area. Then I suggest focusing most of your attention on the BABOK guide, Sneha, and going through its content to understand the business analysis foundational environment. The material from the book is useful, meaningful, and handy. However, the volume might seem quite challenging depending on your on studying style. You can choose to read over the content multiple times so you can prepare, or you can apply intuitive memorization techniques to do your homework. This other option is something that I truly recommend and will show you which techniques I use to prepare for my success. What I would like to emphasize that here are the 9 elicitation techniques defined by the BABOK for business analyst: the brainstorming, document analysis, focus groups, interface analysis, interviews, observation, prototyping, requirements workshop, survey, and questionnaire. Many newbies feel they should be using all of the techniques and are worried that they are not getting the elicitation right, or they think about their experience in this area, and it seems that most of the time they get information about stakeholders needs through casual conversations and reviews. So their experience with elicitation seems a bit informal, Sneha. So this is an area of business analysis that's very uncommon for professionals to have relevant experience in. It's also an area where even the most senior BAs never stop improving. So keep this in mind.
Mhm.
I will give you a scenario here. So first, let me introduce you to the crew that is making going to make this journey much more appealing and fun. Since I have been working for in the IT for a decade in challenging domains and with inspiring people in Dubai and US, I have made up our company for this course. Okay, so we have our software development company XYZ that develops and provides its own solution for kids bike sharing and tracking in big cities. So we are referring to both web and mobile application, cloud integration, and a bunch of high performing engineers. Now, together with the two business analysts, Joe, who is a junior and has just been onboarded, and Katie, an experienced BA professional who is the BA team lead, we will catch the essence of the requirements lifecycle management knowledge area. Besides, they will teach us the memorization techniques and show us some tips and tricks of the profession. Their meetings and conversations will picture some real life examples. So, watch closely how they interact with each other, with the rest of the development team, stakeholders, and which assignments they find most challenging and how they approach them. Katie will surely share useful tips from her rich experience in the IT industry. When we look at the structure of the Babo Guide Sneha, we see that one of the first components explained in all of the knowledge area as well as task is actually the purpose. It's perfectly natural because it states that why and gives a good starting point for the more in-depth explanation of the whole. So, what is requirements lifecycle management all about? Primarily, it explains the tasks that BA professionals perform with the goal to manage and maintain requirements from the elicitation to the retirement. Through these tasks, we discover and establish the meaningful relationships between related requirements and design. We can assess changes to requirements and design when changes are proposed, and we will analyze and reach consensus on these changes leading to their approval. And why is this important? In this knowledge area, as a BA, you need to make sure all stakeholders, business as a whole, and solution requirements and designs are aligned to one another. Plus, the solution needs to implement them. And you are a stakeholder, your designer is a stakeholder, your end user is a stakeholder. The client is a stakeholder. This is where the purpose of requirements lifecycle management lies.
Yeah.
So what it brings to table? What does it brings to table? If approached and performed as previously explained, Sneha, business analysis information will be available for the future use. It will leave substantial information behind. I can say with certainty that we have all been in situations where information about the process already been performed within the organization was unavailable, which made us to do the repetitive work. And that's not very motivating, right?
Yeah.
Besides information availability, the main takeaway from the purpose is that it involves a degree of control over requirements, meaning that we know how they will be implemented in actual solution. So don't forget that it's all about the value delivered, both for the organization and the client. That's why it's important to keep awareness, focus, and control over the processes. Six core concept. This is going to be an interview question. Now let's talk a little bit about the conceptual framework for us business analysis. That's the core concept models. It comprises six core concepts or six key concepts: change, need, solution, stakeholder, value, and context. It represents what business analysis is, describes a profession and the domain of BA, shapes common terminology, evaluates the relationships amongst these six concepts, and evaluates the impact of these concepts and relationships. And each core concept is in its essence an idea crucial to business analysis. And that's why all six are equal and necessary. Interestingly, every concept is defined by the other five concepts and cannot be taken separately or fully understood until all the concepts are understood. Remember, to be able to master the type of information provided or gathered in business analysis, you must comprehend the core uh, concept model. And this is how model tailored in the requirements lifecycle management. It reflects on all of the six concepts from the standpoint of the actual task from the knowledge area. That means it's customized for every task, the specific task. It's customized for this particular task. Likewise, customized for this particular task. For example, here that stakeholder is explained in the BABOK guide as a group or individual with a relationship to change, the need, or the solution in the core concept model. Once transferred to our knowledge area, Sneha, it gets a similar but more fitted definition. Work closely with key stakeholders to maintain understanding, agreement, and approval of requirements and design. You can see these fine adjustments in matching the core meaning with the purpose of the knowledge area we spoke about in the previous clip. And it's also really nicely exposed in the perception of the need as it's defined in the core model as a problem or opportunity to be addressed. Watch now how we translate to requirements lifecycle management core concept model. Trace, prioritize, and maintain requirements to ensure that the need is met. This might seem a bit hard to comprehend at the beginning and also might give you a feeling of discomfort because you can't think of a situation where and how to apply this model, right?
Yeah.
Let's take this slow, but as we progress and you adopt the bits of the knowledge area, plus see how our team, the Joe and Katie's team uses the task, elements, and techniques to solve the assignments, you will find the balance and see the applicability in action. So don't worry about that. It will be easier on the way. The first day, I don't want to stuff you with several things, and I know that you're already swamped, but I don't want to. But one thing I want to make sure is that you are from a QA background, so you know what it is important, why it is important, why for a BA to have like integration testing, right?
Mhm.
I will show you a simple example. Yes, so this is what happens. The BA will do his part, designer will do his part, and development team, they will do their part, QA will do their part, and BA will provide it to client without testing. Okay, this is what happens. That's the reason why testing for a BA is quite important. They need to understand what the problem is and how we are gonna identify it, how we are gonna do an estimation. Yes, so this tool is your key resource to helping you prepare a solid foundation for studying this job. With each knowledge area which I'm going to discuss, the key tasks, techniques that are commonly used are highlighted. So be familiar with that. And it will be required of you to fully understand for your job. Studying the knowledge area with the business analysis core concept model. That is a BACCM, which is a commonly asked question in high level organization for interview purpose. Start off with identifying 6 knowledge areas of BA work. These are the 6 knowledge area work that you need to practice religiously. These include business analysis planning and monitoring, elicitation and collaboration, requirements lifecycle management, strategy analysis, requirements analysis and design, and solution evaluation. Rather than think of them in a linear fashion, know that knowledge area are simply a group of logically related tasks. So these tasks are the activities that accomplish the goal of the knowledge area and can be performed anytime and in any order. You will want to know all 6 knowledge areas very well. That's quite important. Whether it's linear or non-linear, that doesn't matter. And yeah, this is also another area to help you prepare for the ACB examinations, Neha. So please remember these 6 core concept models. And in the BACCM BABOK guide, IABA introduces us to their BACCM, the core concept model. It's a conceptual framework, as you can see here, that encompasses what business analysis is, what it means to perform business analysis task. It helps to define the profession and the domain in which you do business analysis. So looking at the aspects of the core concept model, it's a great way to prepare yourself for not only the exam, but think about your BA professional work experience now. For preparing to be an expert, you should be able to define the core concept component and what you would consider for each of the knowledge area of Sneha. For example, if we talked about strategy analyst or strategy analysis, what is changing? What stakeholders are involved with strategy analysis? And of the change, what does the BA need to consider? See, are you able to grab that thing? If we talked about strategy analysis, what is changing?
I didn't get the
Then
point.
okay,
Harish.
see, for any core concept model, think it this way. Think in
Mhm.
change perspective, needs perspective, solution perspective, stakeholder perspective, value perspective, and context perspective. Something like this.
Okay.
For a BA,
Mhm.
if we talked about strategy analysis, what is changing? What stakeholders are involved with strategy analysis? And what does the BA need to consider while changing? And what we need to consider, what the value will be providing to the organization? What will be the context? When the change occurs, what will be the context that will be changing? So what we need to consider. So when we have the need, how will we consider the need and provide them a solution? So these are interrelated.
Mhm.
Don't think it in linear way, but think it at this perspective, Sneha. Diving into the knowledge area, you will then want to ensure for each knowledge area you can identify the inputs, tasks, and output. Starting with the inputs, Sneha. What is required to perform that task in each knowledge area? Then the
Mhm.
tasks are what activities BA perform that are logically grouped in this knowledge area. Outputs are what you get when you complete that particular task. So practice writing out the structure for each knowledge area until you have them committed to memory, Sneha. That's quite
Mhm.
important. For example, if you have a user story, what you will do, you that is a task. So consider something like this. Keep a flashcard over here, and in another flashcard, you can keep your user story. Another flashcard, keep it as your output. So consider what all are needed to consider this task, to do this task. What all are the inputs? Then start writing out, these are needed and these are pending from this side, these are pending from the BA, these are pending from the project manager, this is need to be done from the accounts department. This then, once these are done, this task is completed. Then once this task is completed, I will have this one ready to produce the stakeholder. Then for another user story, you will have everything done, but you have something waiting for the designer to provide you. So you have to, before that, you have to provide them the springboard or something deliverable that is pending from your end. So you will start working on your end. You will provide them uh, the you will provide them these input from your end so that they can conduct the task. And once they have conduct the task, output we will get once the UXD team completes it. Now, studying the business analysis task and techniques. Once you can comfortably describe each of the knowledge areas and all of the tasks they encompass, you will want to dive into each of the individual tasks. First and foremost, always start with the purpose of the task. This is understanding why a BA would need to do the task and the value it provides. Next, know all the inputs. What information is needed for that task to begin? These are often business needs. Know all the as well as the outputs for other tasks. So outputs are actually the outcome of completing the task. Most importantly, though, we'll be knowing what techniques can be used to perform this particular task. The list from the BABOK guide is not all inclusive, but rather a list of best practices to choose from that leads to successful output. So knowing these well is a key component. Then you should know the guidelines and tools, Sneha, that are often used to help you transform that input into output. So guidelines are often instructions on how to do a task, while tools help you to complete the task. Tools will help you to complete it, and guidelines are to like an instruction how to do it. And finally, which other business analysis task will use the output of the task that you are studying. Again, do these 6 items for each and every one of the tasks listed in the BABOK guide to help you get a firm understanding of the business analyst perform and what is required to successfully complete them. Now, knowing the BA techniques is a core component. While the list of the BABOK guide is not entirely exhaustive of every technique a business analysis may utilize, it represents a majority of the techniques used today. For each of the techniques listed in BABOK, A should begin by knowing the purpose clearly. Even beyond the examination, knowing what the point of using a technique is will save you time and money. Too much time is wasted trying to use a good technique in the wrong situation, Sneha. So always know the purpose soundly for each technique. Then for each technique, understand how it is used and describe the key elements of the techniques. Again, there is generally not a straightforward vocabulary question about the purpose of the technique, but rather recognize the situation and what is happening. Then use your knowledge of that particular technique. This includes the options, the approaches, and different modeling names within the type of technique.
No.
It could be any model or the approach. What approach you are using? Basically, to contact the BRD, if the purpose is a BRD, what is the technique you are using? Are you having a face-to-face conversation with them? Are you having a prerequisite or a document that you are providing to client and they are filling it and providing it back to you? Or you are going to the client location? So that's another technique. You are going to the client location and meeting with the client. So this is a technique that means that it could be approach or the options you do have, which option you are choosing. Likewise, many techniques have additional value beyond the purpose, Neha, such as stakeholder buy-in and participation with many phase limitation. That's why I have added here. such as challenges in virtual environment, or could be dealing with an unskilled facilitator.
Mm.
And all these techniques will be mentioned in the BABOK guide. Once you understand what all the techniques are, you will want to do a crosswalk to reinforce where the techniques will be the most value and commonly done in your workplace today, Sneha. So while going to this, you will understand it better.
Okay.
Create a chart, Sneha, such as this one, for all the techniques listed in the BABOK guide. So studying the business analysis key terms and requirements. So there are a number of key terms that should be memorized so that there is an absolutely no confusion when you see these terms on the examination. So some key terms to be innately familiar with our BABOK guide. What is business analysis? Who is a business analyst? What we mean by design? What an enterprise encompasses? What an organization is in the context of business analysis? What a plan is and what comprises it? Absolutely understand what a requirement is and now the definition of what a risk is. All of these terms can be found in the BABOK guide. Everything. Additionally, there is a very thorough glossary included in the BABOK guide, Sneha. It will include the key words used throughout the discussion. Now, as requirements are often considered the bread and butter of BA work, understanding the requirement schema that is commonly found in workplaces today gives you a solid foundation for not only answering questions on the exam, but a structured approach to defining needs in general. The BABO guide presents us with the following requirement schema that starts with business requirements, which are your goals, objectives, and outcomes that describe why a change is being pursued. Business requirements are often broken down into stakeholder and requirements. These are the stakeholder needs, and yes, identifying their needs, not their wants. That if we met, will deliver the business requirements. So there are temporary requirements only needed to get a change in place, but are no longer required after successful solution recovery. So understand these terms, how they are related when talking about requirements. It's very important. Are not every stakeholder will participate on every task except you, Sneha.
Mm-hmm.
Know the general definition of each of the stakeholder as described in the BABOK guide. So be comfortable with who they are and where in business analysis they participate.
Okay.
Now, underlying competencies are key to successfully perform business analysis activities. All those tasks and techniques, underlying competencies are the knowledge, skills, characteristics, behavior, and personal qualities a BA needs to be successful. They are not limited to a BAs discretely, but are common of successful business analysis practitioners. For studying, you should start with knowing the purpose of each competency. Like everything else valuable for your business analysis career, knowing why is something you should be able to answer on all items on the EasyBA examination. Next, ensure you know the definition of the competency and what requirements there are for applying the competency in BA work. And then know how you would show that someone is successfully demonstrating this competency or not. These effectiveness measures are key to showing your understanding of each competency area. And this is a brain dump, or practicing the cheat sheet is known as the brain dump. As you work through your studying, a helpful technique is something called the brain dump. This is a way to reinforce all the studying you have been doing and help highlight the areas where you might need to spend a little more time. Basically, what you're doing is trying to write down as much as you know and use a structured format to keep you focused and assist in retaining key concepts. Take out a scratch sheet of paper, Sneha, just
Mm-hmm.
a sheet of paper, and try to write down as much as you know. But remember, you have got to write fast so that you don't overanalyze, but focus on short words or phrases to what you know. Or do this way, try doing it in bullet points or listing out all the items or even a quick drawing or sketch. So with this approach, you then you can quickly see what things you know well and what things you don't remember. These are the areas where you go and study some more. So that's why these are valuable to do at the end of every study session. What do you remember? It helps you to show what is being retained. This is a major technique that IBM is using. I have got this IBM certification for this particular stuff sometime 2 years before. I don't remember what the name is exactly. That's why I'm looking for it. Just give me a minute. Yeah, design thinking. Even though it seems quite simple, it's something which great organizations are using. So here is an example of how you might do a brain dump. I know there are 30 tasks in the BABOK guide, okay? So that have the following number structure.
Mm-hmm.
Then I quickly list all the numbers and then I start writing down what each of those tasks are. If I can at least remember the numbers, then I can always try to figure out if I'm missing a task and fill it in as I go. So those are the tasks I will come back more and study. I will do the same with techniques. 50 are listed in the BABOK guide, Sneha.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
I will list out 50 empty spaces first. Then I will try to fill in the names for each one, knowing that they go in an alphabetical order or notice that shorthand abbreviation, especially if it helps. And if I forget one, then I will go to BABOK guide and review that technique a little bit more. I might even draw the BA core concept model in a quick manner as it helps me to remember these are the 6 concepts, and visuals help me remember that. Again, aim for going fast, Neha, so you can get a quick glimpse into how successfully your studying is going. When you can do most of the concept by memory, this shows that you're getting comfortable enough to take the examination. So, this brain dump, as we call it, is something you should practice throughout your studying. Again, take a blank sheet of paper, Sneha, blank sheet of paper out and start writing down everything you can think of without looking at any books or not first. So this helps you show what key concepts you know well. In the same approach, it then helps you to see where you need to spend a little more time studying to get the same level of comfort with the content. And so do these at every study session. You can actually start your study session with one to see where you will focus on. But then, of course, as you finish the study session, it's good to go through it again and help reinforce and retain concepts. I have done this stuff in several things, not only in a professional way, in personal way also I have done this brain dump.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So this is something you can use in your personal life too, and for learning purpose also. And remember when we were a children, our mother or our maid or our tutor, whoever they are, they will give us a small drawing book and they will tell us to draw some fruits or flowers or something. What we will do is we will draw whatever we know in that sheet of paper, right? That's also a brain dump. We will define what a life cycle is and learn about what the phases of a software product's lifespan. Learning about the software's life cycle will prepare us to understand the basic concept behind the many software development process models we will be studying in our upcoming modules. So, in this module, we are going to define the term lifecycle. Use the definition to create a definition of for software lifecycle, and then take a closer look at all the phases that comprise the software lifecycle. Let's get started. How should we define lifecycle? If you're like me, my first impulse is to focus on the word cycle. And I will assume that it's a life cycle is a process that goes around and around. And in other words, a process that goes throughout all of its phases and then repeats itself. Well, that's not the kind of cycle we are talking about here. You are well aware that in the context of software, life cycle is a series of distinct phase or and then here occurring one after the other. So it has a beginning and an end. With this in mind, let's look at some definition of life cycle. So the series of changes in the life of an organism. This is not bad, but we are not talking about something alive here. So we are talking about a software, a series of stages, Neha, as childhood and middle age that characterize the course of existence of an individual. group or culture. Again, not bad. I like the part of about a series of stages, but characterizing the course of existence of something. But again, this definition is talking about living things. I was about to give up looking definitions when I came across any similar stages of stages. So the life cycle of a manufactured product. This one was closer to what I was looking for. After all, software is definitely a manufactured product. Well, based on the examining these definitions, let's see if we can come up with one ourselves. And this is a high level definition and it's not really complete in all details. Let's look at the graphic for the concept. Here we have a series of ways that characterize the course of existence of a software product. It spans from the period from the conception here to death. Of course, we probably all prefer the more gentle word retirement. So we want to capture the idea that a software lifecycle begins when a software product is conceived and ends when the software is no longer needed or used. Now, if you notice in our graphic from the previous notes, we had some unnamed phases between conception and retirement. So just what are these as unnamed phases? As we are about to uh, see, they are fundamental focus of our entire course. Clearly, if you're talking about the life cycle of a piece of software, then these phases must describe how a software product is created. As we will see in a moment that these phases are general and are not and are common to all software creation process. In fact, since they are so general and common, it turns out that they can be implemented in different ways. In this course, we will study several specific implementation of the life cycle, and these different implementation of the software lifecycle are referred to as SDLC or software development process models, we can say. So the aim of this stage is to determine the feasible study whether the product is financially worthwhile and technically feasible. What we will do here is, Sneha, we will understand the problem and we will plan out different solutions. And if you are a project manager, then you have to perform a financial analysis, that is cost and benefit. And requirements analysis and specification, here we will understand what exact requirements of the customer and document them properly. So here, what you will do is, Neha, you will collect all the related data from the customer through interviews and for discussions to clearly understand what the customer really wants. Ensure correctness, consistency, and an ambiguity in the requirements. So organize these requirements in a BRT. Then you will come to the design phase. The aim of this phase is to transform this requirements you have collected in a form or suitable for implementation in some programming language. So they will decompose your requirements into small modules and represent invocation relationships between modules, and different modules are designed in greater detail with using some data structures and algorithms. And then the aim of this stage is to code. They will code and test the modules designed by the designers. The end product of implementation phase is a set of program modules that have been tested individually. Now comes the part which you were doing. Now, yep, we have completed the implementation. Now, aim of this stage is to integrate different modules in a planned manner. That's what you guys were doing. So each integration step, the partially integrated system is tested. After all the modules have been successfully integrated and tested, system testing is carried out. Then the goal of system testing is to ensure that these system functions according to its requirements that you have specified in the BRD. Then comes the maintenance. The aim of this stage is to enhance or maintain the provided service throughout the product. The maintenance of any software product requires more effort than to develop the product itself. Typically, development effort to maintenance effort ratio is 2:3. That's why we are giving it to maintenance. Now, what we will do here is we will make appropriate changes to prevent the occurrence of errors. As I told you, Sneha, there will be some post go live. After going live, we will have some 1 month period or 2 month period. Depends
Mhm.
upon the project. So we know which all are the errors occurring, and we will start working on the maintenance, and we will try to improve that. We will correct errors which were not discovered during the product development phase, and we will improve implementations of the system. We will enhance functionalities of the system next time, and we will port software to new environment. That is the new release. So each of the stages in the SDLC are too vast to be discussed, Sneha, in a beginners here. I focused mainly on the SDLC because it gives you a workflow to develop a software product. And the main topics that we will cover in the course today will include the task, specify, and model requirements, verify requirements, how we will validate those requirements, how we will define requirements architecture, how we are going to define design options and analyze potential value, and then how to recommend the solution. For a start, let me just briefly go through the structure of the BABOK guide, although I assume you are already familiar with it. Okay, when you open the book, you see that it is divided into knowledge areas where requirements analysis and design definitions is one of them. Each knowledge area represents a set of logically related tasks that describe specific activities which is crucial to accomplishing the purpose of the following knowledge area. So this is the base. As stated, each of the knowledge area contains a set of tasks. However, in examination or certification purpose, you will be hardly asked to simply identify the task in the knowledge area or something like this. But most likely, based on the inputs or outputs, you will be asked to identify the knowledge area and task this scenario is referring to, and then you will be able to answer the questions. Then, to help business analysts better perform at their job, the BABOK guide defines business analysis key concepts, then how the underlying competencies work, techniques, and perspective. So it might seem a bit complicated, but after completing the course, you will be able to comprehend what to pay attention to while studying and everything. Look here, where the change is generally defined as the act of transformation in response to a need. So while tailored for requirements, analysis, and design definition, as it is seen as transforming elicitation results into requirements and designs in order to define the change. So, this is just one of the tweaks you will learn. Although the concepts solely are not part of the exam, Sneha, they are highly important for a full understanding of the BABA guide. Another key takeaway from this module is that knowledge areas are not linear. Always remember that. I'm repeatedly saying this because there are several BAs I have seen they are making the same mistake. They will always go for this linear stuff. I have no clue why they are still following the linear thing. And after several years of experience, after some 7 or 8 years of experience, they are learning this stuff that this is not linear. Why can't they learn this in the beginning? Or if someone is teaching them something, they should have learned it at that time. It is not linear. Whenever there is a change is needed or whenever there is something that should be done from our end, don't go for this linear stuffs. Get the thing done. Get it done at the earliest. Don't
Mhm.
wait for anyone to complete it for you. And as stated in the BABA guide, the requirements analysis and design definition knowledge area describes the tasks that BAs perform to structure and organize requirements discovered during elicitation activities, specify and model requirements and design, validate and verify information. So, and identify solution options that the business needs, estimate the potential value that could be realized for each solution option. How does this translate into a tangible process in the real environment? So it simply means that BAs perform a set of numerous iterative activities, starting from the exploration of what is needed over to the solution. So, as we see, the process begins with the need and its exploration, which must be addressed. The BABA guide defines a usable representation of a need as a requirement, which mostly takes the form of a document but can vary depending on the circumstances. The main aim of gathering and setting up requirements is to uncover the value that could be generated if a particular requirement is fulfilled. And now with the design here, on the other hand, our knowledge area refers to the design definition. It now is a good moment to take it clear what it actually means. The BABOK guide insists on usable elements, so the design is seen as a usable representation of a solution. So the focus of the design, how well it could be achieved by a solution if it is completed. Just like a requirement, it is mostly commonly provided in the form of a document. Here, they will provide us some design. A mutual characteristics uh, for both is that they are important tools used to guide change in our organization. The main difference underlined is in how they are used and by whom, because of what one person takes as requirement or maybe other person's design, right? Because what one person, if you are taking the requirements, it could be my design. I can start working on your requirement, right? But what about the development team? Their requirement will be my design, right? So it depends upon what input goes, how the output comes. That's why I said that's one person's requirement, maybe other person's design. So from my design, the development team will start designing the codes. So the level of details is both also a matter of choice, depend on the project's complexity and your stakeholder preference. So, and BA's role is to analyze the potential value of both requirements and design and to communicate intensively with all stakeholders during this process. You have to model needs, requirements, design, and solution while conducting a thorough analysis. Always remember that you have to model these stuffs. It will be easier for you to analyze whether a risk is coming or if our team will be able to do this project, or our product team has got this capacity, or do we need any outsiders help on this, likewise. And that we are aware of what the differences between requirements and designs. Now it's a perfect time to get acquainted with the task of our knowledge area. As we know, each knowledge area includes a certain number of tasks. They can be performed sequentially or iteratively or simultaneously. In any knowledge area, there is no prescription when to perform which task. The only guideline which business analysis must take into account is that necessary inputs to task are available. So this task input should be available for a task to perform. Regarding the task, requirements analysis, design definition knowledge area includes 6 tasks. This is specify and model requirements, verify requirements, validate requirements, define requirements architecture, define design options, analyze potential value, and recommend a solution. Every task will be addressed and explained in a separate module. I will give you some real life examples in a form of scenario in this course. So the actual application and meaning becomes clear. This way you will be able to memorize the rich content. Speaking about memorization, there are a lot of definitions, right? Lot of different terms, concepts, and enumeration that might be tricky to remember, let alone store in your brain for a long period of time. At the beginning of the course, I told you that I have some tips that will help you to memorize the materials in front of you. So another huge takeaway here is that you can apply these tips and techniques to every material you face in your personal life or your everyday life, when shopping for groceries or preparing your presentations or meetings. One of the techniques that can be very effective is associations, because it involves both hemispheres and gets your full brain capacity up and running. Association makes learning powerful. If you associate something new you are trying to remember with something or some things you already know, the memory master teaches us that to remember something, that most effective way is to visualize it in a silly, crazy, and goofy way, and utilize as much sense as possible in your imagination. That's why you remember our gossip hunt stories are quite easier to memorize, because they always make sure that they do the association. They will associate that with something else, or they will try to use all the senses to it. So, with this crazy imagination, your brain tends to store information longer and you can easily track them and reuse whenever needed. Now let me show you my association for the task. Define design options. Ready? Imagine we all know a designer, right?
Yeah.
You must have a friend who is a designer, or you have a colleague, or you have talked to at least one in some situations, or you have a favorite fashion designer at least. So to make this task memorable, I have imagined the graphical designer here, my
Mm-hmm.
graphical designer James. I have been working with for the past couple of years. He is holding a deaf sign in his hands behind his back. You can imagine your designer here, in his hands he's holding this deaf. While there are various options here ahead of him, these options are actually available routes, giving him the opportunity to pick the one he wants. There are several routes. Imagine this way: sensation checkpoints and sunny and green atmosphere. He's feeling content, calm. You can even add some music to it if you like. I actually showed my designer friend that association of mine, and he was proud to have helped me. Please post the course and try to make an association of your own for the same task, and then apply the technique to rest of the 5 tasks. Use the people or places you know best. Add some sensations, colors, feelings to these images. Try to capture the feeling of studying his way. This way you will be able to capture everything. See that this is one of the possibilities, and during the course we will learn how to use special memorization techniques and put these terms you make association for into a context. So, and what can also use, and some you might be familiar with it, is the mind mapping technique. It's quite big topic. Someone has taken, sorry, from my organization, someone has taken mind mapping. He has got doctorate on this.
Mm-hmm.
So besides the memorization techniques and explanation, there's a crew of people in and around in our made up software development which will help us understand the essence of business analysis and provide us with real life examples that might be similar to your job. So we will follow this XYZ company who developed both mobile and web application for kids bike sharing and tracking in big cities. The main customers are parents who are able to use both applications to
Mm-hmm.
share bike for their child. They will track them until they are returned to the main bike station. Later on you will see all the influencers of the solution development. We will put them in the right context, and they will lead us through various cases. Now the request for change. Now what will induce the request for change? Although holding a reasonable market share, XYZ company wants to increase it and introduce changes into internal processes in relationship with their stakeholders. Adding a junior business analyst BA to the team will enable us to see the concepts of the requirements analysis and design definition from his perspective, while having a lead BA with a rich professional experience will make it more clear. And so you are guessing that our main characters are Junior BA Joe and his lead senior BA Katie. Now let's jump together to the next module to see how Joe takes on his first task. So we have seen that there is a significant difference between the requirements and designs, and I will just briefly rephrase it, okay? So the requirements refer to useful usable representation of a need, right? Yes. While the designs refers to a usable representation of a solution. The requirements explain the extent of the value that could be achieved if they are fulfilled. While you can see the design aim to clear up how well it could be achieved by a solution if completed. As we proceed with the course, and like you were able to see in the BABOK guide, it's very important to state the purpose of each task at the very beginning. One of the reasons is that it might be a one-on-one question. The crucial one is that you need to understand the scope and aim of each task in the knowledge area. Specify and model requirements task has a unique purpose, which is to analyze, synthesize, and refine the elicitation results into requirements and design. Now, elicitation results. Let's dig a little deeper into this matter. First, are you familiar with the elicitation results? They derive from elicitation and calibration tasks, which you might have stumbled upon while reading BABOK guide. In the simplest form explained, elicitation serves to discover requirements and design information and confirm the results. It's conducted through direct communication with your stakeholders, research, exploration, or directly handed information. And remember that we said earlier in the course that tasks are not linear and can be performed during your work in any order that satisfies the needs of the organization. But we also underline that inputs for a task must be complete if we want to proceed with it. So it's pretty clear here that once we actually have the elicitation results, we can go on with specifying requirements and modeling designs. Practices for analyzing elicitation results are creating representation of those results, or indeed the description of the specify and model requirements task. For the IT guys, the main meaning of the design refers to technical designs, which are most commonly created by software developers or data architects and other engineers included in the implementation process. On the other hand, all business deliverables are seen as requirements, but the specifying and modeling activities relate to all requirements types, and we will be referring to them in such a manner. It's the same thing like how you are going with the requirement, how well this will happen, how that means if for a test equipment, how the calibration can be happened, so how this will help as to act as a catalyst. So what you can do here is you can identify and basically how you are identifying and defining it, and how you are documenting it. That's why it's mean by requirements calibration. So the necessary inputs without which the tasks specify and model requirements cannot be started the elicitation results. So these results are a product of an elicitation, which has a purpose to explore and identify information relevant to the change in any organization. So you can see here, it's a planned activity carried through the elicitation activity plan with the following output: unconfirmed elicitation results. Once confirmed, the final step here is to communicate then with the stakeholders and make sure that they work towards a common goal. There are a couple of scenarios this task can be proceeded with. If the elicitation results are clear and confirmed, they can be taken as it is. The other way around is that if the elicitation results are not clarified, which leads to more elicitation in order to clarify or expand upon your requirements. So they are the combination of requirements or designs here. Now that we know the purpose of the task, specify and model requirements, what it takes these tasks to be started and where its outputs flow to, we can elaborate on the extensive elements of the task. We will follow our XYZ company crew to see on the real life examples how a junior BA approaches a challenging task and how his lead sets the pace for the implementation. To start with this particular user story, what do I need to provide to the next team? If I do have a particular thing, then what is needed to complete this particular task? Then on the left side, I will start drawing inputs XYZ. That will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and I will draw it in boxes, these inputs. And according to those inputs, I will on the besides those input boxes, what I will do is something like this. Oh, I will divide it into something like this. Okay, this will be my input, this will be my task, and this will be my output. Start creating some boxes like this. So I will do something like this for task 1.1. First, I will write this one, and the second task, I will write someone here. And for this task to a company, I will start writing the inputs. Okay, these are needed to complete this particular task. Then besides that, I will start from whom I can get this. Okay, development team. Next time I will make sure that my iPad is nearby. But if I need some information, then sometimes it could be development team, sometimes it could be the design team, sometimes it could be the sales team. So it's depend. So it depends upon these teams. I will start gathering those inputs, and once I have those inputs ready, I will start working on this particular task, and I will make sure that my output for that task is ready. Then once this is ready, I will start working on 1.2. Again, I will start writing the inputs needed for this one. I will go to the relationship manager, and again, I might go to the project manager. I will get those information. I will start working on this particular task with this information. Once this is completed, then I will move this to output for 2.2. There are several business analysis approaches available for this, but you have to plan the business analysis approach you have using here. The inputs, what are those, how you could be developing those, and for planning and monitoring if it is, then what are the needs that is needed, what are the performance objectives that is needed here. So I will go to the sales department, and then I will plan the approach here. I will try to govern those. I will go for the information management from the PM. Then I will identify the what are the performance indicators. Once this is ready, see, my outputs are also ready, because now then I won't go for this output. This is not at all necessary, just for purpose I told you, but you always go for these two columns, because for and start with one task at a time. Start with one task, it will help you. This one task one, then for that particular task, which input is needed. If you found those inputs, start working with the development team or sales team. You know who will be accountable for this information, so go to that particular person, get it done. Once this is done, once you have this inputs and this development, and not the one, you have the responsible person, then you will just throw it in your dustbin, and you will start thinking by your own, and you will start working on it. I just erased all my Picasso material. Let's dive in, and we will follow our company's task specify and model requirement, and what it takes to these tasks to be started, and where its output flow, how these are related, and how our junior BA Joe approaches a challenging task, and how his lead sets the pace for implementation. So this will be easier for you to understand. So let's dive in. Well, the elements remind you, maybe chemistry, maybe. Chemistry, maybe. There are the ingredients. They are the ingredients which are needed to understand how to perform a task. So always remember, elements are not mandatory and depend solely on the approach to this analysis. My advice would not be skip them at the beginning of your career as a BS, Neha, because you need them to clarify the implementation of the task. That's why I told you, you need to write it in a pen and paper, because now I don't need a pen and paper. I will just think it by my own, and I know how to get it done. But previously, what I will do is, I will take a pen and paper, and I will draw like a baby. I will wait for all the inputs. I will think uh, who from whom I can get those inputs. So in the beginning of your career, don't skip that part. And
Yeah.
as for our current tasks, specify and model requirements, there are 4 elements: model requirements, analyze requirements, represent requirements and attributes, and implement the appropriate levels of abstraction. What is a model in this context? As a BA, you will deal with a lot of information on a daily basis. In order to enable the change in your organization, you will need to communicate with numerous people and groups. So channeling this information to your audience with a goal to support analysis, communication, and understanding in a descriptive and visual way represents a model. Modeling is also a good for confirming what you already know, finding information gaps, and identifying duplicate information. So, to model the requirements, you can choose between two modeling formats: matrices and diagrams. This is quite important. This is quite convincing, and for any client, what I will advise will be go for diagrams. That's quite easier. So, in case when you have complex and consistent structure that can be organized into a number of elements that apply to every entry in the table, you will use matrices. The best practices show that matrices are a great fit for data dictionaries, requirements traceability, for gap analysis. Also, it's good to advise to apply them when prioritizing requirements and recording other requirements, attributes, or metadata. So, this other modeling format, diagram, is a visual representation of a requirement or a set of requirements. When is the diagram the best match? So, in case when you need to stress the complexity in a manner that no more memorable and are easier to present rather than using long textual explanation, a diagram is pictorial and therefore more appealing for our brain to memorize. You can skim it in a blink of an eye or have it printed out and put it in front of you in your space. Plus, diagrams can present hierarchies of items nicely, show data and their relationships, define boundaries for business domains. So it's time to check on our friends at the XYZ company. See, they are waiting for us. Katie, our senior BA, is so happy to have welcomed on board her new colleague Joe. Joe is a junior BA and is eager to start his first assignment. With some expertise in the IT industry, working on the project and product management task, he is aware of XYZ company's business domain, market position, and scope of change. The results are a new project team within the company, which will be responsible for the solution implementation in one city. Primarily, they need to understand roles, responsibilities, and reporting structures that exist within the organization and align those structures with the organization's goals. Joe's task is to create the requirements model to represent the requested information to the team. He's discussing with Katie which requirement category to use. See, Joe goes first. So this conversation will be more interesting and try to understand what they both are communicating. So if you will be able to understand this conversation. Why I made it like a conversation is because you will remember rather than me putting it in slides. So Joe is saying something like, Katie, I know that there are 5 model diagrams. Some of them refer to activities or why over change or data and information or organization's functions. The only one that actually refers to the people within an organization and their role is the model category, peoples and roles. Am I right? See, Katie notes happily. Absolutely. People and roles category represent organizations, groups of people, a role, and their relationship with an enterprise and to a solution. Good job. So let's stop here for a moment. This is a typical situation in any organization or any enterprise where you as a BS Neha will be involved in. To apply your knowledge in an organization, you have to learn the requirements, model formats, and there are categories within. But the main takeaway here is your ability to recognize the situation and move on with the implementation. Aside from just knowing the list and describe each of the requirement model format and the available categories, and yes, prepare for locally questions at the exam. Even so, I would just like to briefly list all of the model categories in this slide: people and roles, rationale, activity flow, capability, and data information. More detailed information is at your disposal at the BABOK guide. Okay, Sneha? Good. I have one more important note here before we move on. When approaching a task, feel free to combine the models. Do not exclude others if you have opted for one. Your goal is to meet stakeholders' need in a given context. Once gathered, all of the available business analysis information needs to be further broken down to see what needs to be changed to fulfill the business need, what needs to stay the same, which are the missing and unnecessary components, and what is the impact of the components. The goal here is to set a basis to reach a conclusion about solution options. So your goal as a BA to reach the final solution, right? And when the requirements are identified through the elicitation, it is a natural need and step to assign them to some kind of attributes and categories. This is something what we do in our everyday life when planning simple tasks or whole house redecoration. So we have some preliminary requests and we make them representable. Now, what does this mean? It means that we assign them enough details and characteristics so they can fulfill the desired level of quantity. And this way the requirements can be fully understood and traceable. We are all facing different viewpoints every day. Agree?
Yeah.
My viewpoint will be different from yours. Your viewpoint will be different from your manager, and his viewpoint will be different from the stakeholders. It means that we assign them enough details and characteristics so they can be. Uh, so you will have to encounter this when defining requirements. Why? Because depending on whom you work with, how complex the change is, what the size of an organization is, or what the preferences of your stakeholder is, what are the level of requirements abstraction will differ. So make sure that you take special care to maintain the meaning and intent of the requirements overall presentation. It's your job to do that. Now, moving on with the next chapter on this module will bring us to our XYZ company crew. We have been mentioning stakeholders already in this course, and you have been around that term a lot, I'm sure. When it comes to stakeholders in BA, there are a list of 11 influencers. Let's first define what the stakeholder actually means in this context. A stakeholder is an individual or group that the business analysis is likely to interact with directly or indirectly. So, any stakeholder can be a source of requirements, assumptions, or constraints. The point here is that each task includes stakeholders who are likely to participate in its execution or who how and will be affected by it. So we have to know who they are and which ones are included in each task. During a daily meeting, Katie asked Joe, could you please proceed with specifying and modeling requirements? The next thing to do, perform a thorough stakeholder analysis to identify stakeholders and their characteristics. Okay. Joe is not exactly sure what to do. Katie, could you please advise me on which technique to use? There are numerous techniques for specifying and modeling requirements, and more than one that relates to stakeholders. Katie is happy to help. Sure. Can you maybe recall the ones related to the stakeholders? Then just goes, let me try. There is organization modeling, roles and permission metrics, and stakeholder list map and personas, right? That's perfectly correct, continues Katie. So now shoot one you find most appropriate for the task. Joe digs up the information and in his brain and says, I could go with either roles and permission metrics or list map or personas. The first one explains the separation of duties among users and external interfaces in utilizing the solution, while the other by defining means listing stakeholders and their characteristics. Clearly, I would use list map or personas. Nice work, adds Katie and continue. However, which of these three parts? It's again Joe's turn to pick his brain, and stakeholders list for its goal is to ensure a thorough list is processed. This map explains more about the relationship between stakeholders, while personas aim to explain how a typical user interacts with the solution. More further into this one, because
Uh-huh.
this is an important topic and you have to learn this in the second module. Yep. Now let's see what kind of list Joe comes up with. Number one, this is your role, and do not omit yourself. Never forget that the one person that's always, and I underline always, a stakeholder in every task is you. Why?
Yeah.
Because for the B is responsible and accountable for the execution of activities. So in XYZ company, there are Katie and Joe. Please note that they can also form a stakeholder group if they participate in a task together. Then we have the role of a customer who uses a product or service or of an interface. They might be paying the solution and have a contractual obligation with the company producing the solution. In our case, The customers are the parents whose kids are riding the bicycles. The parents pay for the application and monthly usage of the bicycles, and they're tracking directly to the solution provider. Next, we have the domain subject matter expert who possess the in-depth knowledge of a topic related to the business need or solution scope. So these stakeholders can be from the organization, such as managers, process owners, legal staffs, but also end users or consultants. Their participation is more than necessary. In this scenario, our end user, a child, will be the domain subject matter expert to refer to the solution. So speaking of end users, they are extremely important. You must know that they are the ones we target, whose needs we have to take into account primarily. End users interact with the solution directly and are our voice of the product or service. That's why we need to take good care of them and include them in our process. In our scenario, the end users are the children who ride bikes. Now, we need the people who have specified knowledge on the solution component, the people that own that expertise and are implementation subject matter experts. Their opinion is highly graded and they also make a lot of decisions. So domain
That's
solution architect in this XYZ company is Jake, and we will be interacting with him during the course. Next, the role that is responsible for the day-to-day management and maintenance of his system or product is operational support. You know, they will be always in the calls. Most of the time, more common ones are product analyst, help desk. And it's very responsible assignment. That's why we have a good project manager. The chance of failure are minimal. See, our Lisa is an excellent project manager and has been with this XYZ company from the beginning. Then, in every process, we must abide by certain quality standards. These standards are actually imposed on the solution by a regulatory through legislation and corporate government standards, or the audit standards or standard definition defined within an organization. The person that is the regular in our team is Mary. The next stakeholder is a supplier, which can range from a consultant to a vendor. The closer we keep them, the smaller the chances are we will be stuck without the needed ingredient for a product. Now, let's not forget about the sponsor who has a huge influence on the project or a process. Sponsors are the initiators of the change, plus, they authorize the work to be done. They control the budget. Most of the time, they act as executives. And Pete is the one who will be authorizing the work in XYZ. To round up the circle, we are meeting Derek, our tester, who is responsible for determining how to verify that the solution meets the requirements. So tester also conducts the verification process, takes into account applicable quality standards and tends to minimize the risk of defects or failures. And QA analysis can be an alternative for this role. All 11 stakeholder roles are here. In our case, we have 2 BAs. So see, all our stakeholders are here. We're going to look at some of the techniques that apply most clearly to the elicitation efforts we undertake as BA. So we will begin by looking at some of the techniques that we use to better understand the present state of things in the organization. Then we will look at techniques that apply to envisioning the future state that we wish to achieve. Following that, we will move on to fostering agreement with stakeholders, then wrap up with capturing context for action. Module review, as I told you, we will be looking at the techniques to apply the envisioning the future, then fostering agreement with the end users, then wrap up the content. One of the most useful techniques we have analysts who elicit information is also among the most simple, and that is observation. By observing how activities take place within the enterprise, we can gain a direct first hand idea of how value is created and where challenges might exist that our solution should help to surmount. This observation can take place chiefly through two different methods. The first being passive observation, where we try to sit back and silently understand how a process is unfolding. This could involve um, even recording to taped sessions where we are not physically present, but instead staff have agreed to the ability for us to look in either digitally or physically on the work that they are doing in order to better understand how an activity takes place. Active observation is also a uniquely valuable form of this technique, where rather than simply silently observing the action, we instead have the opportunity to ask, gain context during the situation by having conversation with the stakeholders. And as they accomplish task, or even perhaps even better, undertake the task ourselves, stepping into the shoes and truly learning from the perspective of those stakeholders who are accomplishing that task, are interest of our analysis work. In order to accomplish effective observation, we need to go into the sessions with a clear definition of what our objectives are going to be. So we should have a clear definition. That's not to say the objectives necessarily need to be terribly intense in nature, Sneha. Instead, it might simply be a fact finding mission for you, where we are interested in learning at a very high level how processes are undertaken in the organization. In other cases, though, if we wish to learn specifically where errors on a factory line might be coming from, then it's important for us to have a very analytical approach to determining how and in what portion of that process our observation efforts might take place. And once these are defined, we need to prepare for our observation by requesting permission or informing the stakeholder that regarding the participation in the observation exercises, as well as ensuring that everyone's schedule are aligned and that the session will be able to take place as intended. From there, we conduct the observation itself, but then we must further confirm, validate our findings. In the case of passive observation, it is very important to go back and clarify with stakeholders after the fact, making sure that what we thought we saw is indeed what we saw, and that no important context was missed during our observation. The type of first-hand insight that observation can offer is extremely valuable in nature, and the opportunity to identify deviations between written processes and reality increases the value of our analysis work, as opposed to simply relying on documented best practices that may not indicate how work is actually achieved. However, observation itself may materially change the reality that it is observed. This is a common effect where workers who know that they are being watched will approach their task differently and perhaps even more productively than in times where they don't believe that observation is taking place. Observation is limited in its effectiveness and used to activities that are not purely knowledge based and unobservable in nature. If a process largely involves a stakeholder simply using their mental tools and expertise to arrive at a decision or to create an outcome, that's not something that we can really sit in observation sense. We can accomplish some learning through elicitation, perhaps conducting an interview with the stakeholder, but watching them as they puzzle through that issue is not going to provide us with unique value. So next are surveys or questionnaires, which are useful for eliciting information from a large group of stakeholders in a time and cost effective manner, we can say. And to ensure that we receive value from surveys or questionnaires, we should define objectives and who our survey group will be that we wish to hear from. We need to develop the structure of our survey, determining whether we are going to ask open-ended questions or restrain answers to a rubric or set of choices. We need to decide on distribution methods, the timelines for not only distributing the survey but receiving it back, as well as our target response. I'll give you an example from Amazon. Whenever you are purchasing something, they will ask for your feedback, right? Like how you are gonna rate from 1 to 5, how you are gonna rate this to your friends, colleagues, likewise. So that's what a survey is. In short, we will get to know from a large group of people whether they are satisfied with that product or not.
Mhm.
Similarly, now one method we can say for addressing this particular pitfall is to use interviews. This will allow for elicitation of information from more than one stakeholder, even if it's one to one or several stakeholders. You can you can have a conversation with them, or you can have an interview with them through a casual conversation, either face to face or through some sort of other synchronizing method of communication such as phone or video conference. So structured interviews are those that involves asking stakeholders purely predefined question. You might have a set of questions already that you have decided on, agreed upon prior to the interview taking place. So unstructured interviews, on the other hand, are free ranging and evolve based on stakeholders' response. If I'm giving you some scenarios and you are asking me some questions back, and based on that questions, if I'm asking you again questions back, that is unstructured interview because I don't have any predefined questions. They are much more natural conversation that happens to evolve organically based on your responses and the curiosities of the analysts themselves. So most successful interviews involve a hybrid approach, we can say, to asking questions using a structured list of questions as a general basis and a guiding star for how the conversation should unfold, but allowing the either analyst or the facilitator enough only way to chase down those areas of interest in a more unstructured fashion where they feel like it might be beneficial. And interview goals or and purposes should be established in advance with the stakeholders because remember I told you, so that they can best prepare for the session, they have their mindset in the correct place, they will be in a position to offer the most of the information uh, to the value to the analyst. If you are giving them a surprise, they won't be prepared, so make sure that you are informing them in prior. Among the benefits of interviews are the fact that well conducted ones help to build relationship with stakeholders and foster support for change initiatives. Simply by feeling like they have been heard and had a large impact on what the future of that change initiative might look like. It's an ideal technique for dynamically eliciting information as well. So, if we ask questions like, wouldn't you agree that this new system is clearly better than the one that is currently in place? Then the respondent may feel like that's exactly the answer we would like to hear, even if it is not the one they agree with or perhaps feel very strong about it. So always remember, it is much more important for us to remove our subjective opinions as analysts from the situation so that we can very clearly hear, uh, understand, and benefit from the perspective of others. Always remember that. Now, uh, being able to gain an understanding of the present state of an organization is of course vital to our role as business analyst, but it means nothing if we don't have the ability to clearly envision what our future should look like for the organization and build the support and pathway necessary for us to achieve those goals. Brainstorming, this is important one. This process can begin often with brainstorming where we simply focus on generating new ideas and a rapid fashion for later analysis and assignment. This is not a time where we are going to spend a substantial amount of time judging any particular ideas, but rather simply generating them, allowing ourselves to take a blue sky approach to a situation and consider all the possibilities that lie before us to do so. A bit of preparation is necessary, helping to explain that this is indeed the goal of to the stakeholders who might participate in the session, and that no idea is too silly or far-fetched to be included at this point. From there, we should take action to participate in the brainstorming session, allowing a substantial amount of time for ideas to percolate between the stakeholders who have been selected to participate without interruptions or distractions, allowing our brain to open up to new ideas and possibilities after this process has been completed and not a moment before. Then we can turn our attention to assessing the ideas that might have come up during our brainstorming session, determining which ones may indeed have merit and be worth chasing down for further analysis and consideration. So brainstorming is great for generating large volume of ideas in short amount of time, and it will always foster creative thinking and also has the potential to serve as a positive team building exercise where we are able to gain a higher level of trust by feeling we can share ideas and aspirations with others. However, conversations and analysis of ideas may derail the brainstorming process. So, if we as analysts will be the ones facilitating a brainstorming session, it is important for us to be mindful of this fact and gently steer the conversation back to ideation. Because whenever you are conducting a brainstorming session, whenever review or critically may begin to come into consideration, at least until the assessment segment at the very end of our brainstorming session, there are chances that it might deviate to some other topic. So whenever you feel so, you have to steer back that conversation to what you are intended to hear. Furthermore, they there are some political and personal dynamics may inhibit the participation of various stakeholders in the brainstorming process. They might not want to look stupid in front of you or the boss, or to be quite frank, what is this is what happens. And so it is important for you have to build that trusting environment and uh, ensure that this level of trust is held throughout all of the stakeholders involved, that we truly stress the importance of being open and freely be able to speak in the session without any fear of complications or trouble after the session has finished. Always keep that in mind. Great. So, mind mapping is another fashion that we can use in order to help not just generate but to structure the ideas that are related to a core concept, allowing all of these different concepts and information and logical relations to be captured and expressed by others. In a visual sense, mind maps can become truly complex and multidimensional in nature, but they always begin with a single topic. See, as we see in the example here, our initial topic is listed in the center, and a variety of keywords allows us to branch out in topic and into subtopics and subtopics of those subtopics and so forth. So long as we can continue to categorize how each of these different concepts might relate to one another, right? For example, here we see that at the interior we are focused on the central area of pedagogy and learning and the variety of different forms that the sort of education contains. If we follow on to one of the topics in group, we would see that mobile learning is one of the we have decided we want to spend some time thinking about it onto the subtopics present. There are mobile app for both of the mobile major mobile platforms, Android app, Apple apps, and mind maps can be very valuable way to help determine what the scope of consideration should be as part of our analysis efforts. Additionally, mind maps are an effective method for sharing complex thoughts and information with others and facilitates creative problem solving by making the relationships between various concepts more clear. However, mind mapping is not meant to be used as a brainstorming tool or rely strictly untraceable relationship between each of these elements. This is a central mistake that many folks will make when embarking upon a mind mapping process. Our goal is here is not purely to create new ideas, but rather to list and to understand the connections between ideas that we might already have generated. Furthermore, mind maps may not convey information effectively to others who don't have the right context. So be careful of that. If you and your stakeholder doesn't share the same perspective, then there's some of the terminology that had been used won't be useful. This is something fun. You can use it internally, collaborative games. These games leverage a notion and game mechanics in order to foster collaboration internally within your team and common understanding regarding a subject. One of the examples of this one is called a product box game, where we might be uh, embarking upon creation of a new solution or product of some sort, such as much as we might see with a cereal box or with any other type of box that a product might come in. We have the opportunity here to list the features that we think are most important to name, the product itself, to figure out what we should show customers and want to emphasize within our marketing. This can help to determine what some of the primary objectives and key features of our future solution development might be, based on the conversation that can unfold in this game like environment. Similarly, affinity maps are another type of collaborative game that we might employ, allowing us to take major topics, then surround with various and other portions of information. We won't use all these nowadays, but make sure that you are familiar with brainstorming and interviews. That's quite important. So the third game concept that we might be employed is known as the fish bowl technique, where a group is split into 21, of which will describe a particular new product or solution, or how they might envision that solution being described and developed. So we can hear from everyone. 21 different ideas will be generated. Nothing will be repeated, while the other half of the group silently observes and listen to that description taking place. The team can switch places in order to learn a bit, but perspectives in hidden assumptions that might be driving our conversations under the radar. So this can be useful in uncovering unidentified assumptions and point of conflict between team members, while also fostering teamwork um, and creative thinking. As it is true for the other high level participants sort of analysis techniques, collaborative games require a significant time commitment, considering the number of participants and may be involved, and scheduling in order to get everyone in the same place at the same time might also be quite difficult as well as such. The techniques should be used judiciously, but collaborative games can offer a lot of value, especially in analysis situations that might be inherently contentious, unless we can all take a step back and remember how to work together uh, on towards our objectives. Another technique that can be employed to elicit information from a group of stakeholders all at once are focus groups. Neha. This is an opportunity to gather perspectives from participants in a moderated setting, where the moderator fosters discussion among participants. Unlike in a group interview session where responses are less collaborative in nature, here we are looking to gain some consensus from the group rather than elicit individual opinions all at the same time. Focus groups work best with 6 to 12 participants. Always make sure that we don't have many, something
Mhm.
that's fairly small in nature. And without training, the moderator may not be able to elicit information from those stakeholders who may be more naturally reserved in nature, and we will lose balance uh, in the conversation that we are trying to have. So it's important to capture focus group results immediately or in the real time as they unfold, so that we can relate back to those findings and always confirm that with stakeholders to ensure that those participants indeed said and meant what we thought and what we heard. This is quite cost and time efficient way to group stakeholder interaction. If we can select participants that adequately represent various stakeholder groups who may be involved, the discussion format offers the opportunity for a deeper understanding and consensus to be built within that participants of that group. And another thing, why it is our objective to make consensus and understanding, our objective is not in fact to have everyone simply thinking of the same direction and not questioning and bringing their own unique perspective to this conversation. Now workshops are another method that can be involved a uh, large set of stakeholders working together to meet a predefined objectives. So these workshops may be useful during any phase of a change initiative, from the earliest phase of planning and understanding what our objectives should be, understanding how we can accomplish those objectives, and how we can assess our performance on a solution once it's been developed. And workshops that are facilitated and documented are the most effective in nature, because this allows to not only bring output with us from the workshop that we can apply back into our analysis work, but also to ensure that the conversation remains on our sessions, objectives, and that all important voices are heard. And participants should be clear on the goals and objectives of the workshop, and it's incumbent on the business analyst to provide this information to them. And the remaining questions or open work items, as well as the next step, should be captured and distributed right after the workshop has been completed. Make sure that this is done right after that. And workshops are a useful structure for stakeholder collaboration and consensus building to take place. And the immediate feedback and discussion inherent in workshop allows for quick iteration to take place, moving towards consensus quickly. However, as is true anytime we have to wrangle a large number of stakeholders together, and having an improper number of participants, either it could be too few or too many, can impair the effectiveness of not only workshop but any of these group style elicitation activities. So always remember, if you have too few or too many, there should be something we remain very mindful of. Now, as we move on from capturing information regarding what objectives we might seek to achieve, we need to eventually begin converting them into some sort of actionable form that we can use in order to actually meet those goals. Now, this is important use case and scenarios. This can be helpful in this regard, as they narratively describe how people or systems interact with solutions in order to accomplish their objectives. These use cases or scenarios can often be diagrammed using two different types of relationships: extend relationships, include relationships. Extend relationship, remember this thing, extend. It incorporate an independent use case that leads to the case being illustrated. Oftentimes, it's used to reference alternate process or data flows that might exist, while include relationships allows the use case to call upon a dependent use case in order to provide functionality that might be important. Remember, this will be independent and include will be depending on the major use case. Now, if that doesn't make sense, next example should help a bit with clarifying things. See, this is an example that it will be easier for you to understand. So let's say that we are operating a new online car dealership. So these are our actors: active buyer, because he is an actor; owner, another actor; a prospect, another actor. So these three are actors. This is a system, this rectangular box. And this is a use case. Use case means any actionable item: financing application, schedule or servicing appointment with the owner, a request existing vehicle appraisal by the prospect. See, so let's say that we are operating a new online car dealership. In this case, we have an active buyer here as one of our potential users, an owner as another potential user, and a prospect that we are speaking with who might considering becoming an active buyer in the future. Of course, one of the use cases that most actively applies to an active buyer would be the ability to purchase a vehicle. However, if part of purchasing a vehicle involves getting the money necessary to purchase that vehicle, if they are not going to be a casually customer, being able to fill out a financing application might be pretty important there, but financing application are not going to be important to those who are not actively considering purchasing a vehicle. Therefore, we would consider this to have an include relationship with purchasing the vehicle into financing department. Now, in fact, however, those who are considering purchasing a vehicle might in fact have one that would like to trade in as well, and therefore they would have some interest in our existing vehicle appraisal mechanism. This might also be a true prospect because who haven't become active buyer yet, but might if they find out how much we would be willing to offer them for their vehicle to get them into a brand new car as well. As such, we would consider this to be an extended relationship where these two independent use cases that are related to one another but are not directly nested in any sort of fashion. Similarly, an owner as well as an active buyer might both be interested in scheduling service appointments, the active buyer for having any work done on the vehicle that they are going to purchase that's necessary before they drive it away, and the owner for any of the ongoing maintenance that might take place as well. Of course, within each of these four different core use cases, we would have similar diagrams that provide greater detail regarding the step that might be involved in each of this. So, use case and scenarios make the scope of work very, very much easier. That it's easier to relate to and understand what your user will be doing, and when you're interacting with the system, how it will be responding, and facilitate conveyance and validation of solution value. But however, design and usability details are not incorporated in use cases or scenarios, which instead focus purely on results and processes, we can say, or how a thing is getting done, or some sort of other non-functional requirements. In addition to use case and scenarios, user stories are often used to be able to put a face and a narrative to a particular way that a solution might be used. So these described by a small contained component of functionality. We these user stories are placed what are known as story cards, oftentimes just a simple 3 by 5 index card that follows a common structure. This is the template: as a dash, I want dash, so that dash. This is one of the famous topic for any business analyst. I want you to go through this one. So I will give a quick example. As a role of some sort, I want a need of some sort is expressed, and so that there is a certain amount of business value that's created. An example here would be, as a sales associate, I want to quickly check if items out of stock in store are available for ship to home, so that we can capture customer revenue that might otherwise walk out of the door. So you can see how this would be an important feature to a brick and mortar retailer that also offers some back end delivery functionality. User stories have advantages and disadvantages too. So this makes accessible to stakeholders the common goals that we would share in creating and deploying our new solutions. They are also easy for stakeholders to validate, and given that we are speaking in their teams and from their perspective when we craft user stories effectively, they are inherently focused and resistant to scope creep in nature, based on the fact that we are only talking about one specific function per story card, and that our solution can in fact be displayed and can post in many of these story cards. And remember, these may not be detailed enough for implementation to take place. But in our example here, perhaps we need to know more about how inventory is handled throughout the organization, and how our inventory management systems might be accessed by frontline employees before we can actually figure out the technical details of how we can fulfill this vision. Let's take a moment to review. Observation allows analysts to gain first-hand understanding of situations, either by participating themselves or watching firsthand as work is conducted within the organization. Surveys and questionnaires are useful in eliciting information from large group of people, but they can be somewhat inhibited by the fact that we are not able to follow up or clarify on the responses given, and we may limit the option for responses. That's a weighted response can give us as part of offering close-ended questions in our survey. Interviews, on the other hand, allow for more extensive elicitation from individuals or small groups to take place, and allow for immediate feedback to be given, but can be somewhat consuming to use and to schedule. Next is brainstorming. These are very useful for generating ideas and sparking creativity, leveraging the unique perspective of various participants involved, while mind mapping can be helpful for organizing and visualizing through thought relationships between a variety of concepts. Collaborative games allow teams to creatively consider challenges, and often to do so in less contentious environment than a more formal meeting or workshop might offer. Now, use cases and scenarios. This will illustrate the business value of functionality, which can offer how a variety of different use cases might relate to one another using the extend and include relationships. So, finally, user stories narratively describe how stakeholders interact with functionality in valuable ways, clearly conveying to decision makers the value that a solution might offer, and allowing for validation from stakeholders to take place that the user story in fact represents the need they have perceived. These tend to be very popular with new teams. This is often because they can be seen as an escape from the large upfront design or waterfall style requirements document that we have worked with in the past. However, Sneha, user stories tend to be large point of struggle with new teams. This is because why user stories are very attractive at first. It's often not clear to a team what a user story is. This means that eventually user stories often tend to revolve back to the highly detailed requirement stocks that we have worked with in the past. Or if they move to the other extreme, in which they are too weak to capture necessary information and critical details of the system fall between the cracks. So BRD comes handy when you're looking for a technology service provider or consultant or a contractor to help you with a project. That is where a business requirement document comes in handy. Often, a BRD is used to detail a business needs when seeking a new technology provider, consultant, or contractor. This process function is responsible for critical to quality parameters that relate to needs and wants of the customer. So, this describes the customer's feedback about their experience with your products or services. And one thing you have to make sure is that, Sneha, BRD focuses on the business objectives and distinguish between the business solution and technical solution. So you have to get an agreement among stakeholders, communicate to the technology service provider the business needs, the customer needs, and what the solution needs to do to satisfy business and customer needs, to determine the input to the next phase of the project, describe in detail of the needs of the customer and business that the solution intends to meet. In order for the requirements document to be clear and successful, many factors must be carefully considered and included. So, in this article, we will explore what a BRD is, and we will cover how to write one and what it looks like in management system. Finally, we will discuss what to include in your BRD as well as templates and examples to get you started. So, this is a formal document, first of all, which outlines the goals and the expectations of an organization, which hopes to achieve by partnering with a vendor to complete a specific project. Remember, it is important to understand this is not same as the functional requirements document. So there is a difference. A BRD deals with what an organization hopes to achieve through vendor partnership, and functional requirement document or FRD deals with how they expect to achieve it. BRD is what, whereas FRD is how. So make sure that you understand the difference between this BRD and what the FRD is. BRD, this you might have heard the term BRD several times, because for a business analyst it is important if we are following waterfall methods, and for GCC countries and for European countries this is much more important, because they still, whatever the technology, whether it is Agile or Scrum, whatever it is, they still follow this BRD. They want a BRD document no matter what. Yes.
Yeah.
Any GCC countries, any MENA region, any Middle East or North American or African or European. So those regions, they still are too strict on having this BRD, even though they are following the Scrum methodology. They want to make sure that there is a BRD. So, for example, imagine an organization that's recently purchased an applicant tracking system to help with their recruiting. So, they might use a BRD to explain that they expect to increase their candidate pipeline by 10%. Then they might create an FRD to detail how they expect to achieve the goal. And this BRD describes the high level business needs, whereas the FRD outlines functions required to fulfill the business needs. This BRD answers the questions on what the business wants. Here, it gives an answer of how it is completed. So, in short, FRD is derived from BRD. So, how
Yes.
exactly do you create a BRD that effectively informs your vendor about outcomes and expectations? So, the most critical component is there are several types of requirements: general, business, functional, detail, non-functional, data, and technical. BRD, it is your responsibility, Sneha. It is your responsibility. It is. BRD is your responsibility, and you should be responsible, accountable for this BRD process. So, what are the problems which the business wants to solve? What are the restrictions? Is it worth to invest the time and money required for the project? All those. You should define the need of the company, the organization. You have to get all the stakeholders involved. You must identify the phases of the project. You should establish the standards or a benchmark for all project requirements. You need to process in place to monitor the schedule and measure milestones. You will also need to use a suitable template. So, to create a BRD document, you should include the project's teams, the business partners, and anyone else who may be needed for the project. Businesses grow or change in phases and cycles, and as they change, the requirements may also change. For the changes in the phases of the business, you must create a business requirements document. The size or stage of the development is of little relevance, but what is important is that different requirements are needed for the business to survive or progress to new phases. So, who should be involved in business requirement document creation?
Stakeholders
Any
whose impact
business
is
partner.
difficult to change.
Yes, that is the quite important one. So, core team of the project, who they can only tell you what is needed, right? So, as you said the last point is quite important, as you said. So, the change or project or product management or quality department or IT management, as needed or available, the subject matter experts, the representatives, your clients, because any or all business partners, all stakeholders, because they know what is needed. So only if they are in the meeting, they will be able to provide you what is needed. So what will this project change that is required in order to deliver the objectives? Only they will be able to answer this. And change can be create, update, and delete something. So this change, we are sticking on to this. What will change? That is what we need to address, not how it will change. That FRD will take care of it. What will change? Requirements level. So you have met with your stakeholders and elicited information, Sneha, about their business processes and business needs.
If
In
we
what
have
follows, there are some, instead of sitting down and attempting to translate what you have just heard into usable documentation, you can first typing up some meeting notes that are more representative of stream of consciousness writing. So read through your handwritten notes, just not type, not just what you managed to get down on paper, but everything else these reminders trigger. So your first goal is to get down on paper what you heard. Take some notes, what you are thinking. I like to use parentheses or brackets to call out implications of what I heard. So something like no, it will be something like now I'm writing. It's like the solution will enable the users to record customer sales. Okay, so not, I will add, all these should be handwritten. Don't go for typing those stuffs. So why would the record customer, why should I record the customer sales? So there should be a question like this. If sometimes you won't be able to ask that questions at that point in time, but always keep this in your note. Or if there is something like uh, so Sneha, you are noting it like they use search. Okay, so search to find newly registered customers and verify their credit card transactions went through successful. So this is what you have written. So like the search to find newly registered customers, and you have to verify that the credit card were successful. So the note for yourself in this case will be, you will be noting down something like, are we not validating this before registering the customer? This will be a requirement that uh, something like the search and verify their credit card transactions I went through successfully. Yes, you are responsible to verify this part, but aren't they validating these cards and all these stuffs while registering? Isn't that a question? So, so similarly, whenever you are writing some notes like this, not there, there should be an additional note of yourself in some, with some using some parentheses, or like you can use something like this, that just to remind you that this is something that you have to ask yourself, or next meeting you have to think about it. So writing up notes typically triggers all kinds of questions. Actually, this why, there will be several whys.
Mhm.
And we simply don't think of this while actively engaged in the conversation or dialogue. This is okay, although you can minimize your follow-up questions after meeting. Some follow-up questions are simply part of the process. So this is the first thing that you have to do: document everything. And what does solution mean in this context? What is a solution? That means if there is something in the BRD, you are providing that solution via the BRD. Okay, this is an
Mhm.
answer for their BRD requirements. So you find big gapping holes, you will want to look back to your subject matter experts and ask some follow-up question. If your questions are specific to one feature, or you do not expect the answer to have significant impact implication, you can ask this question during evaluation. Be sure to capture those questions so you don't lose them either in a requirements issue or within the documents you are creating. Document creation is not some physical solution, and document one requirement at a time. Don't go for some 10 to 15 at a time, and you have to map each requirement to the objectives, and so that you know there's a solution for this one. So now it's time to begin and analyze the information you have pulled together. What does the solution need to change in order to deliver the requirement? So I like use cases because laying out the functionality in a sequence of steps with alternative paths and exception flows help me think through all the possible scenarios and identify gaps in my thinking. But there are many different requirements documentation formats a BA can choose from. Choose the one that best solves the problem to be solved by your project. If there is known verified constraint that material affects a document, then state there. There will be several unknown unknowns. We can't predict. Change is the only constant thing in today's corporate world, Sneha. Understand that. Change is the only constant thing. So it is rapidly becoming a standard way of doing all these in business. But there are several unknown and unknown. So if there is anything known, then state it then and there. Once you have a drafted documentation, before you begin to send it out to your customers for reviewing, let it rest for a day or two with you. Don't send it right away. After creating, just keep it with you for a day or two. Go back with a fresh perspective as a potential new reader of the documentation. So you can ask several questions like, is it clear? Would you be able to gain an understanding of the system? Could you add on to it as the system changes, or you learn more about the project? So we often think about the usability of our systems, but rarely about our documentation. The common thinking is that any documentation is better than no documentation. I totally disagree that, Sneha. No
Mhm.
document is better than bad documentation. So even if you're documenting something, there shouldn't be a bad documentation from your end. It is better than bad documentation. There is a common misunderstanding that any documentation, go for some documentation, it is better than no documentation. That is an absolutely ridiculous statement. No documentation is better than bad documentation. So once you have a draft ready to go, let it sit with your Sneha for a ready day or two. Then you will want to validate your documentation with your subject matter experts. This activity closes the loop for not for them but for us also, by presenting back the details of what you understand. If your subject matter experts are new to this type of documentation, you may want to host a brief tutorial on what the document is or how it will be used. Always be upfront, Sneha, about the kind of feedback you expect, and very open to comments like, you didn't get that right. So, in most situations, I would recommend a brief in person or over the phone walkthrough of the document, and this is a great time to ask your smaller follow-up question. So nothing gets a discussion going like you admitting you did not get all the details in the original discussion. That happens, Neha. We need some several months for creating this BRD, not just one or two sitting. It makes people more open to provide feedback. On occasions, you and your team will identify some significant holes to be filled. Significant holes are best filled in new elicitation sessions, not in any validation meeting. So back up, conduct the elicitation session, and work your way back through the 4 steps. And look for practical ways to reduce requirement defects while also improving your requirements specification. Go for use cases or try to bridge the gap. We help you start your business analyst career and gain confidence in your skills too. And this be able to use dairy functionality to flag premium customers. Don't flag premium customers. Just reply to them then and there. Be able to track and report on sales. Increase accuracy of sales information. So don't go for these also always. Allow authorized users of team leader and above to cancel sales order. Prompt the owner of the sales order to notify the customer of cancelled sales order. Do this. If the sales department is not going for this, you don't have to worry, Sneha. You go ahead and inform them because this is your client too. Common mistake is designing the solution that is not do that have to be done in the upfront. Unjustified requirements. If there is something that you didn't understand, try to get into a discussion with the stakeholders and make that right. Putting in unjustified extra information into the document, don't do for that. If you don't think that that is right, it is right, and you can't provide a justified in or a statement for that, don't put that into BRT. Don't put not putting sufficient details in the BRT. If you know something, make sure that it is in the document. Protecting requirements, don't ego fueled analysis. If you know something, just write it down over there. And most core thing, this is an interview question too. Must have, should have, could have, fish have. You can use a 4x4 quadrant, and you can list like you can use something like the SWOT analysis, as I told you. So something similar to that. Go for this one. So this is must have, should have, could have, wish list. So this will be something like this. And these are the must have requirements. These requirements is a must in our product. And these are should have requirements. This should have. And if these are in the product, then this could be possible. Just try. Wish list is something that we can work on an enhancement, or if there are a chance or scope of increasing, then we can add this. Must have is something that your client is saying this is the primary analysis. I want this for bike our sharing and tracking purposes. So this is the main purpose of our project. I need to track where my bike has arrived. So this is a must have. And my child is a subject matter expert. So if there is something that needs to be added, then something like my child's or the Jake, the solution architecture has provided something like while tracking, it should update you via SMS. So this is a should have via email and SMS. Could have is something like whenever there is an update, someone from the team or project should have informed them via call, not just via text or email messages. Wish is something like while tracking, every 5 minutes they should get a update message in their push or in their email saying that this has reached this station, this has reached this station. So this is something like wish have. If there is something like that, then we wish to. And along with this, we would like to receive some coupons. So this is something in the wish have. And prioritization logic must have. The project objectives cannot be met without this requirement. As I told you, the bike sharing, this is the project objective. Should have. The project objective can be met without this requirement, but not as well as with it. Could have. This requirement only maps to one or more principles, so this is not mandatory. Wish list. This requirement does not map to any project objectives or principles, but if this is something that we can be added, then the customer is pleased. Where do they come from? Functional requirements. So this could be something somewhere from some casual conversation, or by having the BRD, your end users will come up with this. Standard documents, or while doing the workshops, they can come with this. You can any way that is needed. So you will be thinking about this while having a brainstorming session and or mind mapping session, then you will come up with this. So you will propose. So there is an exercise using the objectives you analyze. Define some functional requirements. Map which objectives they contribute. I need you to prioritize them. Make some assumptions or document them. So in some 20 minutes, you have to do it. This is not mandatory, but some upcoming things are mandatory. So any questions, Neha? So you can add the name of the document over here, and so if there is some logo, then go ahead and add this over here.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is some hyperlink, then you can always click on this one and click on this link thing. And while clicking on this link, you can add those hyperlink over here, or else copy, paste something like this. So it will be easier. And this is literally what business requirement document it is. It is what you would be writing. So it is about, don't forget to add your name over here. This is your other name, and I have a version here, and so that everyone who is looking at the BRD will know whether this is the latest version or not. And you can add the date of last update over here. When did you update this document last? And there will be for every project there will be a documentation ID or a project ID. Go ahead and paste it here. Are we good with the first page?
Yeah, yes, we are good with it. Yeah.
So name of the document, Sneha. So, and if you have any hyperlinks, go ahead and add it here, or just copy and paste the URL. And version, or the name, date you have updated this document last, and the document ID. It is so good to have versions that you are keeping up with the latest one. So make sure, like, now you have done a number of things in your requirement elicitation process, and I have already took you through the elicitation process before. So making sure you understand the flow of the users, what users are trying to do, or what you inherit in the system, so you can keep them trying what you are trying to do go right, so you can help them get that. It is not for them, but it's all for also for you to help to get what you are, or your mindset to, once you have all the requirements at elicitation. You need to document all that you have uncovered, which the document the solution or you're proposing that you have got by, so that you can have it as a reference to it. It will be handy for you. So date of last update, when you have created the pre-BRD, it will be 1st Jan. And sometimes by March, you will create this and provide it to the client. Until the project gets completed by 2022, this date keeps on changing from 2020 to 2022. Document ID. For every project, there will be a separate ID that your HR or your accounts department will be handling. Make sure that you paste it over here, Sneha.
Mm-hmm.
There is a table of contents that you can add. So always go for this cover page and add it over here. You can insert that however you feel like to. So go for this insert table or draw table to go for these things and add the table of contents. And whenever you have made some changes, update the entire table. Okay. So it will automatically pull everything over here so that you don't have to change the table every time there is a change. Whenever you are making some change over something like document revision or revision documentation, you don't have to come here and change this. It got automatically changed. So similarly, whenever you are changing the entire documentation, whatever it is over here, end of the day, before closing the document, come here and update entire table. So it will get automatically pulled over here. Okay, come here, write 1, 2, or whatever it is, the subject, some 7 to 11. Then come to references here. Click on any format you would like. It will automatically pull a table of contents here. You can use any format, and you can, if you want, you can use custom table of contents. Like you want this heading to use your hyperlinks instead of page numbers, then you can click it here. From template, then or simple or format modern, there are several things. Show levels like 4 level, 5 level, or only 2 level is needed. More than that is not needed. For my thing, I will always go for 4 levels, so it is easier for me to click on that particular link. It will take me to that BRDs, that thing. If I'm using some table of figures, I will make sure that it is also over here while clicking on the table of figures. Now I don't have a table of figures, that's why it is not clicking. If you want to update table, you can come here and you can update table. If you want to add some text to level 1 or level 2 or level 3, you can click on that, you can add it here. If you want to add some end note, go ahead and insert it here. If you want to insert table of figures, because I don't have a table of figures here, insert table of figures. See, figure 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. If you want to add some cross reference, go ahead and add it over here or wherever it is. I will need to add this in the document history, or so I will add it here. Okay, table of contents, and now comes the revision of documents. So let's keep going. Now we have covered our cover page. Here is a table of contents that we have covered. So you could put the word or table of contents here that hits straight to the point. So you definitely need to have your table of contents where whether you put label or um, uh, whether it is not the thing, or have it just this work for me better, but you need to give your audience that what going to be reading a place to quickly access the different sections that you're going to have it. So table of contents is quite important. If you have a lot of diagrams, as I told you, you can insert a table of figures and stuff you need to have, so that it is important. If you have a lot of diagram and figures and stuff, you need to have a table of figures. Well, they can see where to find what is being shot, what wireframe, what graphs. Similarly, here these two sections, they are very important as history, approvals, revision history, because you sometimes when you revise the document and you want to make sure that each version who wrote it, because sometimes it could be collaborating on those documents, it may not just be you. So that's where the revision will be helpful. The initial draft will be prepared by you, Sneha, and as I told you, remember, zero point 0.3 will be done by SME. 1.0, go for the dates. So did you go the thinking of, because the approval, so if you have a hierarchy of approval testable to the manager, that is to go of the CEO, it has to go to, I don't know, the CEO or somebody above you might want to keep for approval section. If it is just the upper or the BA, what your product owner with your development team in you sit in a room and what is needed to build, and have a section on approval. It depends on the environment. Now we get into the different section for the first section. It is a business problem. Now we have put everything on one page just because of the presentation. I didn't want you to have likely different page. So here, any additional information, that is the reason why they need to know the who can allow them to put the links on it, right? So then executive summary. The project objectives written in a smart this way that the executive summary is being here. Uh, see the project description now. Okay, this is something that you should go in a smart way. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. This is the smart. So make sure that the project's description contains something which is this is broad overview of what is required or what the problem is to be solved. So make sure that the specificity is there, the measurable aspect is there, this is attainable or not, this project is realistic or not, and this is time bound. Project scope. This outlines what to be included and what should not be included. Scope is a definition of the limits or boundaries of a project. And the reason it is so important is because poor management or this project scope is one of the major causes of project failure. So this section details on what the project is going to deliver and what not. Essentially, it is a big picture view of the project. A clear, well-defined scope will enable the supplier and the client to reach a formal agreement, Sneha, on the scope of the stakeholders. The current progress. So this can be included either as a diagram or a list of steps. Diagrams are preferred as they can visually communicate the process easier. The current process, the most of the time, the client will be providing you what the current process is. So you can just copy paste that diagram here. Proposed process. So perhaps more volume will be handled, or more steps are removed, or several systems are integrated. This will depend upon your project. So you can ask your developer to provide you that image. Your project proposed the stakeholder, the internal stakeholder, like your designer or like the Jake, the solution architect, they will be able to provide you the proposed process. Functional requirements. So this describes the functionality that the system is to execute. For example, formatting some text or modulating a signal. They are sometimes known as capabilities. So this outlines in a detailed manner the functional requirements and corresponding features, which includes diagrams, charts, and time outlines. Or then the functional requirements priority. So while providing this requirement, you will be able to understand whether that requirement is critical or high, or whether it is any future enhancement, or whether it is medium that we can include this without affecting the critical and high. And there's a low priority requirement. If they have these requirement and within the scope, time, and scope, we are able to include this, then it is good. Okay. Any questions in this, Sneha?
No, in this priority table, when you say critical, and here you mention all the requirements which are critical in the same table.
Yes. In not just critical, we will keep on under, we will provide some 1 to 10, and there will be some 5 requirements. So for those 5 requirements, we will add that all these are medium, but only first 2 are critical. Then list of acronyms. So if you are using some acronyms in the BRD, make sure that this is added in here. If you are using BRD, make sure that business requirement document is expanded over here. And constraints. What are the limiting factors for the website or the application? Almost always there are 3 constraints. Most of the time it will be time, Sneha, budget, and skills. But there may be more, but these are the good point to begin with. I will give you an example. It will be something like this is a constraint. Always we will go for this as a constraint. So the assumptions outline anticipated events. that would occur during the course of the project. So example, it will be the development resources will be available from project initiation till support. Any assumptions identified are the risk identified, Sneha. So it is your responsibility to think of these assumptions, and whatever you are assuming, to be honest, add it over here so that everyone is aware of what the assumptions are. And this glossary, this one, this is the definition of the terms, as I told you, the BRD, or even the simple things, it should be added over here. UML, Unified Modeling Diagram, or anything like that. And references, or in other word, bibliography, sources of information referenced. You can add the name and link over here. Appendix, so the details and any other information that is needed can be added here. Don't overload the document. So this one, like document history, so whenever this is the initial document, initial BRD you have created in 10/28. So you have created this on October 28th, and you have the initial BRD created, and it was created by, you have identified the gaps. So you can add your name again here. Proposed solution defined. I have identified the proposed solution defined, so my name will go here. And architecture approval. So my architect has approved this. Alan has approved, so I have added Alan's name over here. Similarly, so this is how a BRD looks like. You should create a similar BRD in this way. I will share you this template because this is a globally approved one. You can use this BRD for all your projects. So ideally, the business requirement template or sample BRD should have a summary statement, a project objective, project scope, functional requirements, schedule, time and deadlines, constraints and assumptions. So this summary is the outline of the requirements of the project. To formulate a summary statement is once the BRD is written completely, then it should have the objectives. As I told you, it should be in SMART format: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. It should define the need statement, outlines why the project is needed for the business and how the project will be able to meet the needs. The project scope, this outlines what to be included and what should not be included. And scope is definition of the limits or boundaries or a project, or that reason it is so important, because poor management of the project scope is one of the major scope failure. And your project manager will help you to add the schedule, timelines and deadlines. So each phase of the project is covered in details in this section. This will help to ensure that all stakeholders are aware of what is required and when it will be required. And always don't use complex jargon, rather use simple, easy to understand language that encourages action, Sneha. And remember, Sneha, encourage all other project stakeholders to get involved in activities in this ideas of prototyping or brainstorming or interviews, focus groups, or this BRD creation. So do some feasibility research. Research some of the past projects to determine the feasibility of your BRD. Evaluate your project to understand whether the solution desired can be developed within the constraint of time and cost. Include some visuals such as charts or diagrams. Validate the content after writing the BRD. Have it reviewed thoroughly before distribution, Sneha. Obtain validation of the information and contents, including the assumptions, and ensure that all errors or all omissions are corrected. So validate your scope. You must review and refine the scope. Create the impact document. And bottom line is, this should include all the planning strategies to ensure a formal contract that involves some understandable project phases. Sometimes stories simply get too big for a team to easily tackle. Specifically, bigger stories have a few disadvantages. So, for one, they will go wrong. They could be tougher to estimate because the larger the story becomes, the rest of the things will go wrong while the team is working on developing it. So in addition, larger stories may not distribute work as well across the team, as a single person may pick up a large story and tackle it alone to the duration in the sprint of the project. So what happens if he gets sick or decide to take another job? What happens? You are working on a particular user stories, and now you got a better BA opportunity, and you are actually working on a sprint alone. What
Mhm.
happens to the project?
It will be impacted, obviously.
Largely, because the
Yeah.
remaining team members will try to decipher your work, which is the larger story. The more complicated a task this will become. In addition, it will leave a bigger hole in a project or the sprints, because they don't quite make the deadline. So with smaller stories, there is less temptation to sneak, excuse an almost done story in at the end of the sprint before it is already ready. In contrast, the disadvantages we just spoke of, smaller stories have advantages of their own. For example, smaller stories tend to give you more flexibility when planning releases, as core features can be implemented in one release, while enhancements to those features can be implemented in future releases. Smaller stories also give you a better ability to negotiate with your product owner when planning a sprint. And product owner's primary job is to optimize the ROI of the development team. They are often deemed unnecessary of higher value stories simply repeatedly move up to take their place. So, how big is too big? As we are starting to consider splitting bigger stories into smaller stories, this begs
Mhm.
the question of how big is too big. My terms of big will not be according to you, right? This will vary by team. Whereas the team seems to lose confidence or grow uncomfortable when giving estimates. Teams may be very confident in their estimate for smaller stories. You will start to pick up on subtle cues of the team is becoming less confident as our stories grow larger. Look for these cues as good indication as to where this team might want to begin splitting stories. Also, can just consider the tracking the estimate for individual stories you're working. So this number could be a threshold to trigger for where stories have to be broken down further. For example, see, the bottom layer may be our database layer. Middle layer might be our server side or the mid tier, while the top layer is our user interface layer. While each layer contributes to the overall story, they don't much add value of their own. Think about the Amazon platforms, the user interface, how it will be, web server, how it is going to be, database, how it is going to be. Because many teams recognize the layer analogy early on and start here to base to split the stories, as this is familiar way of working for many teams, especially those that come from a zero development background. This is an easy place for many teams to start.
Mhm.
See, take this as an example. Imagine that we have a profile screen for our application. Now, this profile screen may have a place for basic information as well as the ability to draw in information from a popular social networking site, and then store the combined data in the app's database. This is the big story. So it might be easier if it was split into smaller stories. How will you split it? You are gonna cut this into one story and this into another. So this will be story one, this will be story two. What about this one?
The other one will be another story, email address and password.
Entire thing will be another story, right? So this the team's first thinking maybe divide the story into three smaller stories along a layers. For example, we may have a story to represent the UI portion, which could be include the screen with a sidebar to log into the social networking site. The server side, which might include connecting into the social networking site or validating and saving the data from the social networking or on profile screen into the data layer and the database, which would include creating the tables and indexes which would allow the user data to be stored in an efficient way. So
Mhm.
there are some disadvantages of splitting it horizontally, like this as one story and this as another story. User interface as one story, server side as one story, database as another story. This is how we split. So at the least, stories that are split horizontally often don't provide any tangible value by themselves. So remember, Sneha, if we recall from earlier modules, story should be written in a way that captures some end-to-end piece of functionality. We just can't provide them the user interface with the backing server changes and expect the user to find value by
Yeah.
looking at an image. So, splitting pieces that needs to talk to one another directly across the separate individuals or teams dramatically increases the risk that the puzzle pieces simply won't fit at the end. So, which will directly impact delivery of the product as an alternative. So, let's imagine what will happen if it goes with your suggestion. That is vertically allows our customers to get an entire slice of cake rather than a simple layer. For example, as you said, profile screen as one with basic profile information, and as you said, advanced with second one, and the basic. When you enter the basic profile information, another to capture the advanced profile details, and finally, one by three to draw on the additional data from the social networking side. So one is that the smaller pieces of functionality can be delivered separately and more quickly, which gives us a more negotiating room when creating stories. And this
Yeah.
also encourages more well-rounded development. That is a better thing. For example, I was tell you, a developer cannot complete any of these stories without becoming familiar with the server, right? Or with the API or with the database and the UI. So although this may feel a bit slower at first, it will reduce the bottlenecks on the team. So the team will begin to move faster overall. And for the UI team, user interface stories won't back up waiting on the single developer on the team who knows how to work with the UI to free up to work on them. So this also reduces the risk inherent. So the teams with larger amount of specified skill set. If the single developer who's very strong IT user interface decides to leave the team, this will still be very hard, but not near as devastating as if they have a well rounded developer. Or if the developers on the team had never worked with that section of that code or had never even ever contributed minor features there, so it is going to be tough. In this way, this will encourage the developers to learn other stuffs too. And stories are more testable. See, each incremental change of the system is also smaller, so it gets easier for tester to really verify that the story does what it is supposed to do instead of simply that it looks like as a side effect smaller stories make. So it is easier for everyone actually. Splitting stories vertically tends to create stories that are more testable as stories implement from top to bottom. And splitting stories vertically is not without its disadvantages. One disadvantage is that tackling stories in this way could be unfamiliar way of working a lot of teams, especially those larger teams who are used to simply interacting with the database or the user interface team to complete an entire feature. Forcing that team to take responsibility for that feature into and maybe uncomfortable at first. As a result of this, expect this to push people out of their comfort zone. This will likely result in an initial drop of pot activity as team members learn how to work on UI or developing or sections of the application that they haven't seen before. So, we have already talked about the advantages of splitting stories vertically rather than horizontally, as well as have seen a few examples of how to do this. So now let's look at some more specific techniques that we can use to split our larger stories into smaller stories. When splitting stories, we often refer to seams. Seams are very easy in which stories can be split. See, in our previous example, we had a basic user profile screen that also had the ability to ingest data from a social media site. Though initially described as a single story, we could argue that this profile screen is actually made up of at least two stories, the basic and the additional profile, as well as the social media portion. Since these features are really quite different, the stock difference is the feature set gives us the nice, which we can this larger story into smaller ones. Now, there are a multitude of patterns for splitting stories, but looking at some of the most common patterns in this module, Sneha, The patterns we'll learn about include splitting stories on steps involved in a workflow, splitting stories on the user roles, that a story may focus on splitting stories on both positive and negative cases, which may arise from a user story with the future, splitting stories on ilities, which are the less tangible qualities of a story, such as security or scalability, splitting stories on third party dependencies. Now, while sometimes these may take the form of a technical dependency, more often than not, they are actual dependencies on work that's required from teams external to your own. And finally, splitting stories by spikes, which are a great way to reduce the unknown in stories that focus on concepts that your team may not be familiar with. Splitting by workflow. Let's begin by looking at a pattern for splitting a story on the steps of a workflow. Now, if you have a story that captures a complex workflow, you can break each workflow into separate steps, each represented by single stories. We have seen this already when we encounter the epic of a customer ripping a CD to their device. So, if you recall, if we split this epic down into separate stories, which each represented a step into a workflow, how will we have those? How will we split one into several? We now have the stories that represent inserting a CD, plugging in a device, selecting the songs customer would like to rate, paying for the service by credit card. See, rip the music to the device. We still want to be sure that each step provides some sort of measurable value to the user. We may add the ability for the customer to pay for the service, and then we can add the ability to prompt the user to recycle their CDs. It is like this. As a customer, no customers pay by credit card. So as an owner, I want the customer to pay for the service by credit card so I can do whatever. You don't have to provide this one, but I have added I can generate revenue from this service. But you were right. One part is customer no need to pay for this service by credit card. As an owner, we can pay by credit card. Just go through this one.
This particular thing, that fourth point here, the customer who is inserting the CD is the one who will be paying the money, right? No?
Think as an owner, I want the customer to pay for this service by credit card. So customer will be paying by credit card, but who wants to do that?
Okay, I got it. It's
Yes.
not that he wants to do it with willingness, but owner wants to do it as a task.
Yes.
He wants the customer to get it done, right?
Whose role? Look at the role here.
As a owner, I want a customer to pay for this service by credit card, so I can generate revenue from the service. Okay, sure.
Now, okay, we mentioned before how user stories to only focus on a single role. Now, if you have a story that mentions two separate roles, now as you took as an example, where offers the same feature for both roles, but this could be a great scene to split on, Sneha. Splitting each row into a separate story allows you to schedule and tackle each role separately. So remember our salesperson example. Salespeople are often divided into two camps: those who find new business, those who grow existing business. If we had a product that helps salespeople manage their relationship with the client, just give me a user story with a salesperson, Sneha. One, as a salesperson, I want to track the number of times I contact customers so I can compare those interaction against an established benchmark for a closing a date. But remember, we actually have two types of people. People role in our system, the new business and the account growth. Since Sneha, each type of salesperson will have a different relationship with their client. How they interact with their clients will differ. So, as a result, we may decide to split this story into two roles. First, okay, the role for the new business person. See, he will likely reflect that the new business salesperson may be more aggressive because when you get a new job, you will be quite aggressive and you will contact the potential client by phone relatively often until the new business closes, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so as a result, the benchmark that we're comparing his phone calls against will reflect how many times it takes to land a prospect before a sale. As a result, not only would the story reflect that the new business a person is more likely to contact the client by phone, but it will also reflect that we are measuring these calls against a specific benchmark we have established for closing a sale for a new prospect. Conversely, Sneha, the growth account salesperson is less likely to be aggressive in the relationship and would likely do better by contacting the client in a less urgent medium, such as the email and at a lower frequency. Do you agree with that? Splitting by positive and negative cases. Therefore, we can see that it makes more sense to create a single story for the positive case, which is successfully logging in, and then to create separate stories for the negative case, which include entering a blank username. What will happen as a tester? You can imagine, Sneha, what happens when a customer enters a blank username, entering an invalid username repeatedly, and entering invalid credentials. How the user would reset their password, right?
Yes.
So splitting stories in this way will allow us to prioritize the different negative cases separately, so the team can focus on the ones that turn out to be important and table those that present little danger to valid user.
You really write like this? You split it and write it?
Yes. Because for many of the users, especially for Arabs, you know how good they are, right? You have worked with several Arabs, so they want this to be like a kid. So I want to write this way. Only to Arabs and uh, American clients, US clients and Arab clients, I need to provide this way. Not for British clients. They are quite brilliant. They can understand it. They don't want these simple user stories. But for Arabs and Americans, we need to uh, give user stories how I'm gonna give this to my son.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at splitting stories by elites, the less tangible qualities of ter that that while important may not be immediately evident to the user. So common elites we may encounter include security, Sneha.
Okay.
So is this user's data handled and stored in a secure manner, or reliability? How likely is the app to crash? Where to become unavailable for an extended period of time? Yeah. So how reliability? How I was not sure. Okay. How likely is the app to crash? Where to become unavailable for an extended period, or time, or scalability? How how well does the app perform in handling some quite a big amount of data, you can say, for large number of users? For example, Sneha, remember our original story regarding ripping the music from a CD to a customer's device. So inside of this epic, there is a smaller story to actually capture the act of ripping the music from the CD, converting it to a format suitable for playback on the device, and then copying files in the new format to the device. For a long album, this could potentially be a time consuming operation. However, rather than spending a lot of time upfront trying to tune the performance of this operation, it may make sense for the team to create a story to later come back and optimize the performance of this process. So this will out testers and business owners to have the chance to get a feel for the workflow of the overall process, and to make any changes necessary before the team comes too far down the path of performance during the process. As a result, Snehasi, we may decide to break out of scalability story for the team to focus on tuning the process after the workflow has been done. Now, I would like to recall out two important things regarding this story. First, notice that, see, the performance requirement has a specific measurable metrics around it. We didn't simply say that the process has to complete quickly, or the process has to be complete in a reasonable time. So don't use those vague guidelines. So the ripping process for a 60-minute album must complete in under 5 minutes. So this gives us a very specific, a measurable way to determine whether or not we have met a performance criteria or if we haven't met a performance criteria. Second thing, Sneha, I would like to call out is that notice that although this is a more technical story, I have so chosen to use customer as the role. So when working with stories that are more technical in nature, it is often tempting to use developer as the role to convey that the developers, the party most likely interested in the outcome. However, I would like to discourage this because Sneha, it is important that we be able to relate every story to some valuable business frame, user benefit. In this case, while it is true that the developer is likely the most valuable or interested party here, but actually it's actually the user who could actually feel the benefit of the outcome, right?
Yeah.
Because they want the process to get over quickly. So another ility is which may be lurking in the epic is security. Remember that we create a story to capture the customer paying for the service by credit card so the owner can generate revenue. So implicit in this story is the idea that since we are working with credit card data, would need to treat it with all the protections and precautions necessary, such as encrypting the credit card information when it is sent to the card provider for validation. Now, encrypting data during transport can be a tricky proposition for a team who hasn't done so before. Therefore, it may be it makes sense to split the encryption and security of the story into another story, which would allow the team to first get the payment processing working in a test environment, so it could be exercised by both testers and the business owners, and then circle back, add another security layer before the product is launched. So with this in mind, we may break the security, pushing the story into separate story like this one. Again, notice the first, while first glance this may feel like a developer story, Sneha, we keep the owner in the interested row since they are the ones who ultimately benefit from the completion. So splitting by ilities. Ilities are a great way to differ less tangible qualities of a user story in order to give the customer a chance to test out the core features early and decide that they still make sense in their present form. Oftentimes, after customers had the opportunity to play with the future in this rough state, they may decide to heavily rework the flow of the feature or to drop it entirely. Since certain abilities are often expensive to implement by deferring them until the after the future is a bit more secure. We can avoid a tremendous amount of expensive rework or taste waste by avoiding spending time securing our performance tuning features that may never see the light of the day. So another scene which we can split stories are third party dependencies. Oftentimes we are gonna encounter stories which rely on work from someone external to the team. So many times this may take form of UI related story that depends on adding a certain graphic icon or style which is created by contractor or shared graphics team. So it could be helpful, Sneha, to split the acts of getting and using the asset into two separate roles, that is looking. Example is, see, remember our profile screen. So now what? We as developers may be quite happy with our layout and graphic wizardry, or customer may not. Therefore, the customer may request that we use high quality social media graphics from our company graphics department, as well as you rely on them to provide the proper fonts and layouts that are consistent with the rest. The application, since we can't complete the profile screen stories without these assets, Neha, we can separate the act of getting them from the proper parties into separate stories. So ensure that we get the proper assets from the graphics department before we begin to work. This may take the form of a story that captures the owner's best interest. We need to retrieve the styling and funds from our graphics department. So we're consistent with the remainder of the application, and a story that captures that for the customer, we need to get a high quality icon that represents a social media account so the customer can feel confident that we are a reputable partner of their social network. Once again, notice that these may feel like developer stories, Neha. I took special interest in relating them back to the customers and business owners. This will help ensure the stories get the attention that they deserve. When we are prioritizing now, while I have used graphics in the example here, you can actually use the same techniques for any user story which has a dependency on third party that is external to the team. And the resource is that they need to look actual complete the real work. This helps in prevent the case of a team picking up a story and then realizing that they don't have all the resources in place to complete the story. Another common pattern for this splitting into third party dependencies is that they are they depend on parties too often, allow the team to complete the main portion of the stories with the placeholders. So alternatively, you can also use this technique to designate these stories as blockers to the main one. When planning, I like to schedule the stories to actually get the assets provided by the third party Sneha a few weeks ahead of the story to actually do the associated work to give the team plenty of lead time to get right. Don't wait for our date to provide it to the client. Get it from them some 2 weeks before, so your team and development team can work on the graphics, or if they have some dependencies, you are providing them, you are giving them available deliverables earlier itself, so that
Yeah,
they
that's
won't block the story. So now I have saved the spikes to the end, so because it's one of my favorite technique for tackling some hard stories, Neha. Is
mm-hmm.
sometimes a team we encounter a story that is simply too hard for them to get their hand around due to the unknowns. These unknowns may include things like this story touches an older section of code or no one on the team is familiar with. It's one as a good feel for how hard the code will be. So the change or the story uses a new API or library that none of the team has ever worked with. As a result, no one knows how easy or how hard the feature will be to build in that technology. So another example is of an unknown would be the team's tackling of a new concept or problem that's wholly unfamiliar to all the individuals on the team. So therefore, they have no basis of experience on which to use their planning or estimating. Now, a good option to use when encountering these type of stories, it split the stories into two smaller stories. A spike in which the team only investigates the problem and learn just enough about the upcoming story to plan for an estimate, and an actual feature story in which we do the actual work that was originally specified. So to see this in action, let's see. To see this in action, let's return to our story that specified the customer must pay by credit card. This way, it will be easier for you. Now, the owner would like our customer to be able to pay by credit card, but no one on the team has ever done credit card processing before. Since this is a new ground for the team, they don't have a great way to plan for an estimate, right? Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yes.
So this story, until they learn more about it, Sneha, therefore they may decide to break this into two, so they can approach it with more confidence. One story to investigate the options for credit card processing, our spike story, and one actually implement the credit cards processing in the product, our feature story. So let's take a look at our spike story. Now that this is our actual story that specifies the developer as a role now, while of advice against the previously, this does make sense because spike stories since the developers who directly benefit from the result, right? In
Yeah.
addition, since spike stories should always precede actual feature stories who do refer to an end user or business owner as the active role, then we can think of spike stories. It's simple a prerequisites to ultimately completing the feature. I also know that we specify the value clauses wanting to estimate the resorting work. This gives us a great specific direction of the type of investigation we'll want to complete in the spike. Now, While this spike focuses on estimation, others may simply to be determine the feasibility of a certain solution or just to look at the options available for solving a certain problem. Second story. This is our original user story that you are going to provide it to your client. So go through this. See, now that we have looked deeper into the steps required, we should be able to more confidently estimate this story, even though no one has the team has any previous experience with the type of work.
This would be done by whom? I mean, you usually BA give the other one as a owner. You gave the user story, right? So you would give
Yes,
that, and
but here, see, as an owner, yes, this one. When we create this for developers, they will create this user story because they are the one ultimately get benefits of this one, right? They are the one who can estimate the work required to incorporate it to our product.
so
So they will
before they
create
start
another user
coding,
story.
they will have some cases. They also write some cases, or how do they do? I mean,
No cases, they will add it in the description saying that as a developer, I want to investigate the steps for credit card processing. When you give this, they will provide you this back.
then you validate and you confirm that it is fine, or something like that, or
Yes. I will
Mhm.
look into it, and
Okay.
if this makes sense, my product owner will approve it, not me.
I think wherever
Then
you're working, it's
again,
very process oriented. It's very good actually.
no, and my product owner won't look into it. The product owner should look into it actually. So the getting the most out of spikes. So now before we move on, let's look at some tips for getting the most out of spikes. The first tip is to always time box the spike, Sneha. Since spikes are exploratory by nature, they are tough to estimate. Instead of estimating the spike, think of it as a time box always. For example, instead of saying that it will take 2 days for us to learn the answer, we need to say we will spend no more than 2 days exploring this problem. So after 2 days, we would take the information we have learned thus far and we use that as our basis for how to approach the feature story. Okay. Otherwise, the team will take 7 days, 10 days, and they will just go to cafeteria and they will eat pizzas and coffee all that time. And another tip, it's always specified, clear goal. When you write this, because yeah, that really makes sense. Because you know one thing, whenever I was working as a junior business analyst, I will always look for this time box. My senior business consultant, she will provide me something like, Krishma, you have to provide it by end of the week. I will say yes, ma'am. I will complete it. Either I will complete it by end of the day, and I will look at YouTube or Insta or some other pages or some business pages that I will look into, and I will go out with my friends and I will go to my favorite pizza. We all will gather there. We'll have mugs of coffee and we will have several uh, foods from there. And or else what I will do is by Friday evening I will start working on it, and in another 2 hours I will provide it to her by chilling
Mhm.
Thursday, Wednesday and Thursday. So make sure that you don't repeat that.
Yeah.
When you are a business analyst, time box it. When you are not, enjoy it. So now be specific always. It's always specified, clear goal. When you write the story for the spikes, the spikes are exploratory, so you will still want to clear goal to help focus the developers effort. For example, if you are exploring a new technology, you may want to list specific features you need to work with. So, and specify that you need to spend some time with each other. Or if you're looking at an older section of code, you may want to specify search and attributes you want to investigate, such as coupling to other sections of the code base or test coverage, so you can better understand the risk and impact of changing it. In the case of our spike, to better understand credit card processing, we want to be able to list and describe the specific steps that need to happen. Now, the larger story summary here is the less likely the team will be able to understand. See, bigger stories are tougher for a team to understand, Sneha. So they are less likely to be completed on time or as specified. We may split stories either horizontally or vertically. While horizontally splitting stories is usually more familiar for teams new to splitting your stories vertically has more benefits, many more benefits. And finally, spikes are a great way to split stories to have significant amount of unknown. So dedicating one story to a bit of initial investigation, Sneha, allows the team to approach the next story to do the work much more confidently. Here we will cover several different things. We'll go through both system and form navigation of CRM. We will talk about how to use a business process flow as well as how to create those forms really quick. So we will be also editing those CRM records that we have created. And additionally, we will go through the details around create custom views and we will use some box dashboards. We will learn how to navigate and around help with dynamic CRM as well as go through the user settings that are available to us. Okay, so now we have got system navigation, also referred to as site map. For the most part, these are interchangeable names. Always remember, you will have more technical folks call the site camp. So we will have our users call in the system navigation. They are interchangeable and the same thing. So we have three separate levels here of navigation. We start with an area that contains a group, and that group contains some items. We start with this, and we can export it as an XML. Always the cases are exported as an XML most of the time. And we can edit as XML, or we can use one of the freely available community tools. It depends upon the client. I always recommend using the tool. It is so much easier. So the most common tools that are available for free in the community is XRM. It's a drag and drop visual editor that allows you to visualize and immediately put together your navigation. You can find that .xrm tools and then XRM toolbox has many tools, among them a sitemap editor. These will be allocated to you already, but this part, this one, you have to be aware of this one. As I told you, remember, whenever you are assigned to here Microsoft Dynamics CRM, go to sales, under services, come to services always. Under services, you can find all your clients under accounts. Your under accounts, you can find all your contacts here. All your company's clients will be under this contacts. Your internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, everything will be available this one. So you have to be aware of and you have full access to these three things. And you can always request for this report access. So make sure that you have requested or they grant you access for the reports to generate some charts and tools. Okay, this accounts will have all your client names, your client most point of contact, their revenue, their details, their monthly details, their annual revenue, everything will be included here. Contacts, the vice president of the technical one, the peon, the clerk, everyone's detail will be here in the contacts. Okay, case will be, as I told you, for every project there will be several cases. Under several cases, we can create several events. Events means cases, this issues. So they will create some events and we can start working on that. If you want to send some secure messages, send it via events. Okay, now you have a look around how we navigate and use the sitemap in CRM here. Here we are in our brand new dynamic CRM organization. I'm using a touchscreen monitor for most of those interactions there, but here I'm using my desktop. If your resolution is slightly different, then you may see things presented in a different way. So for example, on the top of this area where we have a search icon, the magnifying glass. If you have a different resolution, you will likely see a search box. If we have a different resolution, we won't see a magnifying glass or a search box, so that the dialog comes through. So in the top left corner, we have the Microsoft Dynamics CRM. That is our home button. That takes us to back to whatever our home pages. So here on the right hand side, we have what we refer to as the hamburger menu. This is always called as hamburger menu. Whenever you see three tiles like this is called hamburger menu. Form navigation is the heart and soul of what you are doing in Dynamics CRM. We have several form types available, and we have the ability to make several of these as custom or additional ones for our users. So the forms also have form areas, which we will see when we go through our demonstration. We have got the command bar, we have got the sectionized column set grid, see as you've seen here. All kind of things are available to us within the command bar. This is the case detail. That means the description. ID, it will be automatically here. Subject information, customer, your client name. Origin, the web. Description, here you can add why you have created this case. Okay, whether this is for particular blah blah blah, all those stuffs you can add here. Here, any you can add. It's an editable form. So whenever you're creating a new service, you can add those details over here. Save and close, you have to always do when you need to get rid of this one. If you save this, you won't be able to close it. Whenever you're adding one thing, go ahead and click save. Add description, click save. Add default duration, click save. Now we have a dashboard. So dashboards are very powerful, and I told you to get access for charts, because it's a great all up views of a lots of data, but this is customizable. And whenever there are several that come with CRM out of the box. They can include something as charts and views, and you need to get access, because anything that you want to put it in an iframe, and as I said, there are system ones that are available, and it will be quite useful for you to pull those reports and provide it to your clients. And then users with the proper permission can make personal dashboards, and they can share you as well. They can personalize it with the chart and such views. You will be able to see this my open opportunities, and you can see all the records here with the name, when you have changed it, return authorization wall. This is a subject and what you have made it, what changes you have made, and who created this, all these stuffs. Whether the case has been closed, whether this is still active, all those status can be seen over here. So in the sales area, in the service area, in the marketing area, all those dashboards are available to you, assuming your permissions are correct. So once this dashboard loads, we will have a look and see what different things are available to us from this dashboard. Click through on the chart, and then what's going to happen is you will have the opportunity to drill down into the chart, like you would have done on other sets of data that's showing a chart inside CRM. We will see all of these were created during a particular month, or you want to pull data of an annually. It's quite easier and more customizable. And this dynamic CRM documentation team has gone to great lengths to provide us with extensive documentation too. You can get some more videos, ebooks, and ability to customize help as an administrator. There is a CRM administrator position, but no one will go to degrade themselves. So don't think about that. You have to learn that too. That is just an administrator job posting. Someone will be looking into that. You don't have to worry about that. See, while clicking on CRM help and training, you will get all the help from this one. CRM for Outlook basis, CRM for Outlook users gate, everything will be available when you click on the help button inside CRM. Now we have got some user settings that are available, and all users should have this option to them. Some of these options are limited based on settings from the administrator. So as a user of Dynamics CRM, you have several different options available for tailoring your experience. Let's have a look at different system options available to individual users. So depending on your role, you might want to change what is your home, what is going to show up first for you. Is it going to be sales? Is it going to be marketing? Then once you have selected that, you have the chance to choose which one of these becomes your homepage. One of the things I always change right away is the records per page. I personally like to have as many records on a page as possible. So the reason is it gives me a faster access to the things I am looking for. So I will always go for from 50, I will go for maximum or 200. So, and simple. If I'm getting a detailed view, I won't be easily able to set that. I will always go for mountain time, US and Canada. You can change your timing. Now we can just to review of what we have done. We have talked about system navigation and about form navigation, how that defines your experience. We have talked about how using a business process flow and that helps your users be automated. And then finally, we wound up by showing you the different user setting available.